we have one?
Yeah.
The I is the only order yesterday. I was going to say off of it. You said 3. The I is the only order transmitted or rejected.
That's interesting.
Welcome to the regularly scheduled October 2020 meeting of the Smithville R2 Board of Education. If you would, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you. Just before we started, I looked out in the audience and I told Dr. Schutz that I was kind of jealous. Russell always had the little ones to choose from to help start the Pledge of Allegiance, and we don't get that with these meetings right now. So I look forward to getting back to our normal meetings where we can involve our students. Okay, we have 7.0 adoption modification of the agenda. 7.1 adoption and modification of the agenda. I just will let the audience know that if you went off of an agenda prior to this afternoon, we have moved a couple of items on the agenda. We moved the general obligation bond resolution and final issuance up to our communications in 9.1. And we moved what was in old business, the early separation incentive plan, down into new business at 12.2, because it would follow then the discussion on the FY21 second budget revision. So those changes have already been made to the agenda, and we will be approving the agenda as it is presented in our packet. Does anybody have any discussion or any changes they need to make to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any further discussion on the agenda? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.2, approval of the executive session meeting minutes from September 16th of 2020. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the meeting minutes from September 16th? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes for September 16th.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes for September 16th, 2020. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes with one abstention. 7.3, approve the regular session meeting minutes for September 16th, 2020. Does anybody have any comments or questions or corrections that need to be made to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for September 16th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for September 16th, 2020. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. 7.4, approve the workshop meeting minutes for our special meeting on October 6th, 2020. Any comments or corrections that need to be made to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the workshop meeting minutes for our October 6th, 2020 workshop.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve our workshop meeting minutes for the October 6th, 2020 meeting. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 8.0, approval of consent agenda items. We had 8.1, approve the bills for payment. 8.2, 2020 Missouri Local Compliance Plan and Certification Statement. 8.3, supplemental pay for October. 8.4, technology surplus property. 8.5, approve Eagle Heights Addition Special Inspections Vendor. And 8.6, approve policy EBB revision for second reading. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the consent agenda items?
Yeah, Denny, I'll just make a quick comment. Sorry, I can't get used to this. One of the payments, I believe it was $75,000 to North Kansas City School District. Just wanted to know that that is the Northland CAPS tuition. It just is funneled through North Kansas City School District. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone.
Yes, North Kansas City Schools has the fiduciary responsibility of Northland CAPS, so it all funnels through their budget.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the consent agenda items? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion and a second to approve 8.1 through 8.6 on our consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve our consent agenda items 8.1 through 8.6. Any further discussion? Please vote. We're going to skip over 9.1 for right now, right?
I think so.
Okay. We're going to, in 9.0, our communications, that's where we move the general obligation bond resolution to 9.1. We're going to bump it down just a little bit on the agenda until our bond counsel arrives. So 9.2, board priorities update.
Yeah, rather than go through a bunch of different board priorities, we thought we'd zero in on one of your priorities, and that's early childhood. As the board is aware, with the Eagle Heights addition of the 6 classrooms, 2 of those classrooms will be designated towards expanding our early childhood program. And you've heard me say before, in my 12 years in the district, we've really not done much different with our early childhood education. And newer board members may not be aware that we do not get ADA for early childhood students. So it's difficult for a school district to provide more traditional preschool and basically get paid for to provide those services. So we do have early childhood special education, of course, and we do have Title I, and there are federal dollars tied to that. So our quest, if you will, has been to expand the early childhood services. We've got to do something to move forward. So we have this square footage with the 6 classrooms at Eagle Heights. Today we have that. Eagle Heights is growing and growing quickly, so that may not always be there for the long term, but we will have that when that addition is complete. So we would like to provide in those 2 classrooms a paid program. There is a potential for a sliding scale. We will look at all of those opportunities. We just want the opportunity to serve more students because this is what we're being asked of our community. Some of you have been at key communicator meetings at schools where parents are asking about this. Our parents as teachers are hearing about this, and I've actually gathered some data on doing a needs assessment, if you will. So this is something that we're being asked to provide, and that's what we're currently doing, is exploring how we're going to utilize these 2 classrooms. So Andre Ambrosen now is not just, she was your Director of Student and Special Services. Now she's your Director of Special Services, and this kind of follows under her umbrella. So Andre, would you mind coming up and filling in some blanks there and adding your thoughts to what we're up to right now with the development of that program?
Sure. Obviously, we're excited to be able to expand our program with the 2 additional classrooms.
Use a microphone.
I have to go all the way up here.
Yep.
Obviously, we're excited to be able to expand our early childhood program. Obviously, we'd like to have a full center, and I know that's in our plan. But right now, we're excited just to have 2 classrooms that we'll be able to utilize. We're looking to be able to do that next fall. At Eagle Heights. We're surveying parents, getting additional information of what type of program that would be for those 2 classrooms. It could be 2 full-day programs. It could be 2 half-day programs. It could be 1 classroom as a full-day program, and the other classroom could be a part-time or a morning session and then an afternoon session. So as we visit with parents and talk about what the needs are, we'll be able to move forward. There are some things that we have to go through with licensing and different things to have the early childhood program, since it's not special education or title, and we're working through that with DESE of what that would look like. So we're really excited to be able to get started and working with some of our families to determine what the needs are.
And one of the things that has caused us through the years to be hesitant of adding things like before and after school care, for example, that was a big discussion for us, and we got a lot of community input and the input of the local daycare providers, because we don't want to compete with any business. We don't want to do that. That's not our role in this community. Our role is to support the students of this community as best we possibly can. So, we're going to need to have some conversations with those daycare providers in the community so that we can design a program that meets the needs of our students but doesn't compete with them as well. So that's important to us, and we'll begin those conversations very soon.
Absolutely.
Joe's here.
Any questions?
What's our current preschool program look like?
So we have early childhood special education, and we have early childhood title, and those are blended. So we're able to provide some peer modeling with some of our title students in our early childhood. So we currently have 3 classrooms, 1 at each elementary right now, and we have a morning program, and then we have an afternoon program.
Thank you. I'm glad to see we're working on expanding this. Thank you.
Do we have any collaborative right now with all of, because we have a great infrastructure of childcare centers throughout our community. Do we collaborate with them in terms of curriculum standards, education?
So they know what curriculum we're using. Right now we use HighScope, and they try to also piggyback off HighScope. I'm not sure if all of them are using that, but that is the curriculum that our early childhood uses.
Okay.
And that's one of the DESE models as well.
Because I do agree, Dr. Schutz, I think we have to be mindful of how we interact within that environment in terms out in the community and those businesses. But I think there's opportunity for great collaboration in terms of how we set up curriculum standards, monitor, support those organizations to grow. So they're providing better kiddos who, when they hit our district, are hitting certain thresholds and standards that we're wanting them to meet when they get to us. So
in the past, we were with some students as needed going to their daycare provider to provide some services. Students that may have an IEP that have some, maybe it's PT that they need, or speech
or language.
Yeah. So we still do that, do we not?
Correct.
Going to the daycare to provide services for that child. So that's a good example, I think, of collaboration and partnership.
yeah, and I think there's great opportunities in front of us outside of brick and mortar too.
Yeah.
I think, helping provide professional development for some of our educators in these preschools, right? We can take a proactive approach from that standpoint, and we can invest dollars that direction which would only help us as they get to us. So I think it's an interesting time. I think it's really neat. It's something that I know a lot of people in my neighborhood have been excited about, but we all have really young kiddos. So
Right.
we're excited to see it grow.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to backtrack to our 9.1, our general obligation bond resolution.
Yeah, we now have our, not just our bond counsel, but we also have our bond consultant in the room. Joe Kinder and Hayden Crump are here. I'm going to turn it over to Wayne. Do you have any points of introduction or anything you want to say before these gentlemen take over from there, specifically Joe?
You know all, I've met Joe Kinder as people. There's been several meetings, and this is Hayden Crumpton with Gilmore Bell, who is actually the bond counsel. They'll come together tonight, and there's a recommendation before you to authorize the final issuance resolution for the bond sales that happened today. And Joe will talk about that just a little bit. Hayden may chime in, but it went very, very well from my perspective. And again, this is all a result of the support that we received back last August for the issuance of $14.1 million for the first phase of the master building plan.
And just a reminder for everybody that's going to speak tonight, we are using Zoom we finally got our Zoom license. So if you would, please step up to the mic so that the people following online can actually hear you.
Great. Well, thank you, folks. Again, I'm Joe Kinder. I'll let Hayden handle the resolution side, the actual action item this evening. But we're here for the exciting part of the money side of things. But as Mr. Kruger stated, you all can't be commended enough for, number one, the work that you're doing in the face of all that's going on right now, but the planning that you did and the execution that then resulted in what you've got in terms of this bond issue. You know, we talked about last time, I told you thank you very much, and I credited you for the amazing work you did with no more time and no more resources to take care of kids. And then, oh, by the way, you got to continue to do the business of the school district every day, which was part of this capital planning that you've done. And as you know, you've got your capital plans lined out, your bond issuances for the next 10 years, and we've actually got hypothetical debt services for you going out all the way to 2050. So you have done a tremendous job of planning. And again, the sale happened today and the execution was tremendous. And I'm happy to tell you that you are going to be able to, we think, very easily and very handily fit those next two phases of your capital projects plan in the timely manner that you wanted to do that. So I commend you. You know, it takes a lot, I know, to do that planning, but it's a great work, and now your community knows what they've got coming for them, and you got in great shape in terms of your facilities moving forward. So we were in the market this morning for the $14.1 million. I think you all have on your computer, I didn't want to print it off and be handing it to you tonight, a packet that has some numbers on it that starts Smithville R2 School District up in the top left. This is the sources and usage page. I'll just hit a few highlights because I know we went in this pretty far in depth last time, but this is where the money's coming from, where it's going. If you go down to the uses of funds, the first line there, $15.383 million for construction. So again, we utilize premium bonds, which are very common in Missouri, particularly for bedroom communities that don't have a lot of assessed value. Again, you're capped at that 15% of your assessed value is all the debt that you can have outstanding at any given moment. And when you're a lot of rooftops, a lot of homes, that doesn't bring a lot of assessed value. So we wanted to utilize those premium bonds to the extent that we could without sacrificing yield and get you as much money as we could towards your projects, because we know you've got a lot of capital needs. So just shy of $15.4 million. Again, very, very good deal there. The next line down, total underwriter discount, that's our fee. We express that as $6.50 per $1,000 for the $91,650. Bond counsel, Hayden Crumpton's fee. Rating agency, again, you know, folks, to have the support of your community for two separate questions in August, given all that was going on, is tremendous. And S&P most definitely took note of that. I mean, to get your AA- once again, from a rating perspective, you know, from your community, you can't expect any higher when we look at some of the things that are outside of your control, which are median income, median housing value, things like that. But you, from a management perspective, from the work you're doing and the work your administration is doing to execute your plans, your goals, your visioning, that's a tremendous result. But that really, really helps drive down interest rates. So that's a big deal. I know big line item there in terms of cost. And then state auditor fee. I know you've heard this. This is probably my second or third time talking about a financing with you, but you all worked with Greg Bricker, one of my former partners and mentors for years and years, who passed away in 2016. And prior to 2009, you would have paid $14,100 to the state auditor for about what's about an hour's worth of work. Lee Summit just did a $170 million issue. They would have paid $170,000 to the state auditor for what amounts to about an hour's worth of work. Greg Bricker didn't think that was right. He worked with the state auditor, made sure they were on the same page with him on this, worked with some legislators, and in 2009, got a bill passed that capped that fee at $1,000, and in fact, got an emergency clause on it. So it worked that entire summer building season of 2009. So we're now in the 12th really building season where Greg Bricker, his legacy, his work on behalf of the kids of the entire state of Missouri, not just our clients, is putting millions, literally millions of dollars back into school districts' bank accounts to do building projects. And then on the flip side of that, when we are able to refinance and save you some money, it saves taxpayers additional dollars. So as long as you'll allow me the privilege and the pleasure to come out and see you, I'm going to tell you that story. Greg was a big part of my life, and that's a big part of his legacy, and I want to make sure that we continue that on. So those are some of the fees that we highlight through there. The next page, pricing summary. There's a lot of numbers on that page, folks, but the good news is on the very bottom right, we're going to talk interest rates a little bit here. You were in the market for $14.1 million today with an average life of about 16 years, and you borrowed that money, that $15.3 million at just a shade over 2.5%. From a historical perspective, that's, I mean, just incredible. We can't really talk enough about how low interest rates are. And that's part of what's allowing you to execute the plan the way that you wanted to, but that's just kind of the cherry on top. But anyway, you have borrowed, and that true interest cost, that 2.56%, that's what we call in layman's terms, or in our parlance, not layman's terms, yield to worst. So that's if you never refinance those, you will pay on that $15.3 million that goes into your bank a little over 2.5%. But there's a chance if you're able to refinance those for savings purposes that you'll even pay less interest cost total on this issue. So just a tremendous deal all the way around. I mean, you know, from a historical perspective over the last 40 or 50 years, you couldn't have borrowed any lower. So you hit the market at the right time and got things going really well. The next page, the debt service schedule, that's going to show you the payments on just this issue that you make. You make interest payments on September 1st and then interest and principal on March 1st. You'll see there that there are no principal payments being made in the early years of this, and that's intentional. That's how we're able to do these no tax increase bond issues, or in your case, actually shift some money over into your operating fund so that you can actually shift levy over there and spend more dollars on kiddos and less dollars on facilities of the same level levy. But what we're doing there is we want to look at your debt service fund as one big total package, one big plan of finance. So all your debt that's outstanding that sits there in that dedicated fund that we can only use to pay off bricks and mortar debt. You can't use it on books or paying teachers or any of that stuff. We want to look at all of that as one big common plan of finance. And so rest assured, you're amortizing a lot of principal. So you're paying a lot of principal down in those years, 2021 through 2027. It's just that you're paying them on other issues. So if we look at all of your debt as a whole in Fund 3, you're paying principal and interest that looks just like your mortgage payment would or your car payment would. So, but those are the payments that you'll make on this particular issue. And that's it. I mean, again, you know, to recap, you've done a great job. This is the culmination of that. Had a great result today. Put our 200 institutional bond salesmen to work, accessing over 200,000 investor accounts, breaking your issue up into $5,000 increments, selling it off to the people willing to pay the highest price, which for you all is the lowest yield, and that resulted in a little over 2.5% interest cost for you all today. So I'll hand it over to Hayden Crumpton and stick around for questions.
Good evening, everybody. As Joe said, I'm Hayden Crumpton with the law firm of Gilmore & Bell in Kansas City here.
we represent the district as bond counsel on all of their tax-exempt financings, including this bond transaction. We draft all the legal documents and make sure the district's, compliant with state law requirements, Securities and Exchange Commission rules and regulations, and federal tax law requirements that give the district the benefit of borrowing at a tax-exempt interest rate. So before you have the bond resolution, which authorizes the issuance of the general obligation school building bonds in the principal amount of $14,100,000 as approved by the voters at the August 2020 election. All the terms relating to the bonds, the principal amounts, maturity schedule, interest rates, purchase price, things of that nature, all in Schedule 1 to that bond resolution. So I would be happy to answer any questions relating to the transaction or any of the legal documents if any members have any questions. Excellent. Well, congratulations on the successful sale.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Does anybody have any other comments or questions while we've got our bond counsel and our counsel here? Okay, thank you. Mr. Kruger, would you mind coming up to the mic, please?
Just one more point of emphasis that Mr. Kinder mentioned is, again, this sets the district up very, very well for future implementation of the master building plan. So not only the 2020 phase, but the 2025 phase and the 2030 phase of that plan, all being able to be financed through general obligation bonds, and likely, again, we can't control everything, hence COVID, but it potentially all can be done without a tax rate increase. So it's again, just exciting news for the district going many, many years into the future.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, this is an action item for the board. And if I'm not mistaken, we just need to approve the resolution of the Smithville R2 School District authorization of the general obligation bonds as presented to the board that went out for sale today, this morning, October 21st of 2020. Any discussion on that authorization? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the resolution of the Smithville R2 School District authorization of the general obligation bonds.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the resolution of the Smithville R2 School District authorization for the general obligation school building bonds. If no further discussion, please vote. Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
You can stick around for the entire meeting if you like, or you could go ahead and make your way home to your families. I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Moving on in our agenda to 9.3, we have a construction update.
Mr. Hedgecorth.
You guys should be able to see the construction update electronically in your packets. The main thing I wanted to note is the very last page has a section on the Horizon HVAC systems, the high school kitchen hood, and also the playgrounds. Last month on your update, it talked about having those done over Christmas break. In our last OAC meeting, it was discussed with that timeline, and DLR really felt like we'd get preferential pricing if we waited until the summer. Because the major construction on that activity center would also be in the summer. So they felt like when they bid that out, contractors would already see that they're on site and then bid that work versus coming at a specialty visit during the winter break and price it then. So we decided to go ahead and push those projects to the summer instead of over winter break to get preferential pricing from those vendors. And they thought it'd be substantial, especially the playground. And so we decided to go ahead and push those out. So that was the main difference. Everything else is pretty much the same as you saw before in the timeline, with everything tracking where we had before. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
So as far as the timeline, then the Eagle Heights construction groundbreaking is scheduled for late November.
It is, yeah. It might be early December, late November, a little bit on weather there, but right in that timeline.
And then we're looking at late March for the activities.
We
center,
are,
correct?
yep, we sure are.
Okay.
The activities is pushed out a little bit later than before. The first timeline was DLR's estimate. They had not given that to J.E. Dunn yet, and then J.E. Dunn did add some months to that. DLR was really trying to push that timeline basically based on my request to be done before in November. But J.E. Dunn basically came back and said there's just no way. So that'll disappoint some coaches, but we want to do this right. We want to do this well, and so we want to make sure we put the right timeline. If weather cooperates, it could be done earlier than it existed, because if there is some weather days in there scheduled in, is a hedge to that schedule, but that's what they have right now is scheduled. So, which would be an April 2022 opening for the activity center. So it would be about 1 year construction. And just to give you a timeline, Eagle Heights took 16 to 18 months to complete. And so the activity center would be about 12 months to complete. So
Compared to the 8 years that they've already been waiting from original timelines or original hopes, estimations, the 2 to 3 months isn't going to be too bad of a wait.
sure. Hopefully they understand and want to make sure we get a quality product in the end. So.
Eagle Heights, though, we're talking next school year.
So yeah, Eagle Heights stays at the July, summer of 2021 for a completion. Yep, that stays the same.
Okay.
Two different architects. ACI Boland is the Eagle Heights architect, and the DLR is, of course, the architect for our activity center, the kitchen hood, the HVAC improvements at Horizon, and then also our playground improvements.
ACI is the original architect for Eagle Heights, and so we wanted to be sure to use them to finish the school off with these 6 classrooms.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Hedgecorth? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Move on to 9.4, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services.
Yes, Dr. Cradafil is not here this evening, so I'm going to step in and just a few brief things about the items that she has in your packet. First of all, the AP Scholar Press release. When we get this, it's always a celebration. We always have a lot of students represented in this. One of the things that we have here that we don't normally see, and matter of fact, this is the first time, as the release states, Joshua Grandstaff has been awarded the AP International Diploma Award. It's the first time in Smithville High School a student has earned this award. It's very, very high distinction, and obviously we're extremely proud of Joshua in this accomplishment. But all in all, 62 students have received in some way, shape, or form an AP Scholar Award. So that's a lot of kids. We do have a very, as you stack it up against other high schools, we do have a very robust offering of AP courses. And we certainly have a lot of students that just take as many as they can. So that's good. I know my kids have certainly done that, most of them anyway. So she wanted to bring that to your attention, and you have that to read through in more depth at your leisure if you haven't already. And then the second item is the APR. Normally included in our APR is our academic performance from the MAP tests and the EOC exams. Well, we didn't have MAP tests or EOC exams this past spring, so we don't have the academic feedback as it relates to the APR. We do have some feedback in some other areas, though, and Michelle provides those for you there. One is on track and not on target, but on track, which, as you can see from what she's listed, on track is just below on target. Well, it's not on target because we couldn't give the ASVAB in the spring either. So another COVID-related thing. On track is not bad. We'd much rather be on target. So we just missed that too, even with not being able to provide the ASVAB. So our APR data that we were able to harvest after the spring is good data. We do very, very well in most of these areas. So it's unfortunate not to have that data, but really and truly, what our teachers get the most value of is data they can use right away. And we use NWEA to provide assessment data that we can put to work to support students that need to support and to make any adjustments in our classrooms. We don't go to and comb through our map data as nearly as much as we do the live data that we get on a quarterly basis in our classrooms. So those are the two items that Michelle had for you, and I can try to entertain any questions you may have on those.
Remind me again, how is attendance being counted this year?
In a lot of different ways. It's very, very complicated. In fact, Mr. Kruger and Kim Davis were working on that today as it relates to our students that are in quarantine. There's there's a lot of different ways. There's an AMI plan, there's an AMI-X plan, there's traditional attendance, there's students when they're virtual, we just count them 94% attendance. So really and truly, it depends on what group of students you're talking about. But there is a way and a means that we're provided direction for that will allow us to have, count credit for all of our students that are truly in attendance.
Legally?
Legally,
Okay,
yes,
good,
absolutely legally, of course. We will follow the rules to the letter of the law. And we will also get as much attendance credit as we're eligible for. Good question.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Schutz? I almost said Dr. Cradfield, sorry.
She's prettier than I am.
Moving on then to 9.5, comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to make comments to the board. A total of 20 minutes will be allocated for public comment. Speakers will be heard in the order in which they notified the superintendent of their desire to speak. If the 20 minutes expires prior to all speakers being heard, any speakers not heard may submit their comments in writing to the superintendent of the Board of Education. Individuals addressing the board should state their name, address, and limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes. Items or issues related to specific personnel should not be discussed in open session. First, we have Tanya Foster that will be speaking to us on the hybrid schedule. Ms. Foster, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic, please.
Hi, I'm Tanya Foster. Can you hear me? I live in Whiskey Ridge here in Smithville. I have 3 kids in this school district. I've got a 7th grader, a junior, and a senior in high school. It's exciting for me. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me. I'm sure you probably know who I am because I've sent multiple letters. I've sent multiple letters to the administration, and I've sent multiple letters to the school board. I don't know if I was not following the proper protocol in addressing you guys in that way because I haven't really gotten very much feedback at all. I've gotten a little feedback from the administration, and I have gotten very, very little feedback from the school board. So I thought I would try to get my chance to talk to you guys tonight. I'm assuming everybody did get my letter. I tried to include the letter that I'd written to the administration, as well as some ideas and some recommendations for the school board to look through for some other options besides what we're doing right now with the hybrid. I included both of those for the purpose of what I'm seeing as maybe not complete, I don't want to say transparency, but maybe a lack of communication or a lack of research that's being done on other options that our school district could research and perhaps try rather than just sticking with just what Clay County's suggesting for us to do. Because I've spent a lot of time researching. I've spent quite a few hours conversing back and forth with the Clay County Health Administration. And many times it's been put clear to me also with the state school board, and everyone has said what they're saying from Clay County is a recommendation. It's not a mandate. And I'm sure if you had a look at all my different things, which I'd like to take a chance to kind of go through some of those if I can squeeze it in 5 minutes, but Blue Springs, I'm gonna just keep saying them over and over. I'm sure if you guys have done any of your research, Blue Springs has decided to go completely rogue. They live in, the schools are in Jackson County, some are in the city of KC-Mo. They've been going to school full face-to-face so far all school year. And if you looked at some of those statistics that I sent you, when I sent it out last week, their student body and faculty over the course of the year has a 0.4% positivity rate. Whereas at the same amount of time, the kids and the faculty here at Smithville have a 0.97% positivity rate. And I just don't see how we can ignore numbers like that. My idea, you wonder, well, you know, why would that be? Because our high school and middle school students are out 3 days a week, congregating at one another's houses, going to parties. Every other day is a day off. And I don't want to have to put it that way, but I have 3 kids at home, and that's what I'm seeing. And they're 3 very good students, and they're getting straight A's. But I don't see that they're learning the amount that they could be learning if they were in school every day. I think that we need to start taking into consideration what the community is interested in and what the parents in this district want to see. And I know at the beginning of the school year, most parents, a majority of parents, wanted to see their kids in school. And I can't even tell you, just by me putting my few little comments out on Facebook, how many people in this community have reached out to me. I had 2 people today I've never met before, and they've said to me, I don't know you, I've just seen what you put out there, and please keep fighting for our kids. And it makes me sad that no one else would join me here. I mean, it's nerve-wracking. I mean, like, I'm nervous right now, but you know what? I'm not here to push an agenda. I'm not here even just for my own kids, but I'm here for all these kids in this district because they deserve more than what we're giving them just with 2 days a week of school. They're not getting school on Wednesdays. They're not. And I've talked to administrators, and I've talked to teachers, and I've talked to kids. And it's supposed to be a virtual day of learning. But now I've been told it's a virtual health check, a mental health check. The teachers can use that as a mental health check. And then I asked my own kids, do you feel like that's a mental health check? And he said, well, what do you think, Mom? If you're feeling down and depressed, you want to open your screen up and see your teacher on the screen again? They don't want to see teachers on a screen. They deserve to have the opportunity to come to school when the data is all there. And I put this, I don't know if you're allowed to touch it. I got this article just went out today. And there's so much research out there. And for us just to blindly take what North Kansas City's doing or what Kearney chooses, and for us not to take however much time it takes to research to find a better plan for our kids at Smithville, we're doing them a disservice. And I put in my example here, I'm talking about different choices of things we could do. You know, we could, first of all, I think we deserve to create a parent task force and a student task force. I don't know why the high school kids aren't getting heard. And when I did the Let Them Play movement, the only thing I said that night, with all those kids standing up on the stage, the only thing I said to those kids, you kids need to make the difference. You kids. And I don't know why they're not willing to come out and talk. I don't understand it. Unless they're just so depressed at this point that they've just rolled over and they're just going to take it. But the kids need to be heard. I mean, when we were younger, kids would make a statement, and these kids aren't. We should be asking why aren't they? So I don't know why we haven't gotten surveys. I teach in the North Kansas City School District. We've had, I believe, 2 or 3 parent surveys go out. Teacher surveys have gone out. I'm not sure if there's teacher surveys, but we got our first survey 2 days ago, since the school year started. Did any of you guys see the survey? Any of the school board members?
I saw it.
Because you have kids? Okay. The survey was so vague, it listed about 16 things. Mark what you think is going best. I had to mark something. I wouldn't have marked anything. The next was 16 things. Mark what you think's a problem. I wanted to mark everything, but I could mark one thing. There was no place for comments. And then there was a choice. Do you want to stay with a hybrid or 100% in person, which is not what's happening? Or do you want to go all virtual? Or do you want to? So you had 3 choices. Well, I would rather choose 2 days for my kids than none, but that's not a good choice. I think the parents need to be considered. I think the kids need to be considered. We can change gating. I mean, I'm not going to go through all this because you guys had it and there was different links to click on so you could see how other districts have done these things. You could get in touch with those superintendents and with those school districts. How did they change their gating criteria? And I know the quarantine is a problem. And Dr. Schutz said that, and he's right. I mean, I work in a school, I haven't had a plan time since the school year basically started. I'm going in and covering teachers' rooms so that they can go to the bathroom or eat lunch outside their classroom. It's hard, but you can figure it out. And if the quarantine's a problem, we can adopt different quarantines bylines. They've done it all through the state of Iowa. They've done it in southern Missouri. Spring Hill did it over in Kansas. So there are so many choices. And I guess that's all I'm trying to say. Please think about some other things. We do not just have to do, Clay County suggested it. We can do something different. Platte County's voted. They've decided their kids are going back. Independence has got their seniors all back face to face every day. And my kids get to go 2 days a week. I got 12-year-olds that are home all day, 3 days a week. I don't even see how it's safe. I would be more concerned of a kid catching COVID. I'd be way more concerned that my 12-year-old could be the object of a predator. They're home. Everybody knows all of our kids are home 3 days a week. So there's way more than COVID to consider here. And one case has been transmitted inside our schools. One. And our kids still can't come to school. So anyway, that's my plea.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lisa Guess, and she will be talking to us about the panel discussion on October 28th in the high school cafeteria.
Good evening. I am Lisa Guess, and I live at 675 South Commercial, which is the middle school. I'm there 8 hours of the day and usually more than my own home. I live in Platte City, but I'm proud to be a staff member here in Smithville. And I've been at the middle school now for 12 years. Seems like it's been about 5. But during my time at the middle school, I have enjoyed serving not only as a teacher and a librarian, but also as the Smithville NEA president. So I'm here tonight to let you know that I appreciate, on behalf of all the teachers, I appreciate you taking the time to investigate and learn about the concept of collective bargaining. I witnessed Susan Goldammer's presentation on October 6th, and I appreciate you all listening to that. I would like to extend an additional opportunity for you to come on October 28th, that's 1 week from tonight, at 5:30 p.m. in the cafeteria here at the high school. And we have a panel of 5 different people who are going to be talking more about collective bargaining from an NEA point of view. And it's an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. If you have questions that you want to prepare ahead of time, you're welcome to send those to me. If you want to bring questions that night as you hear the conversation, you're welcome to ask them live. And it is an open meeting, so if there's anybody here tonight who wants to learn more, principals, staff members, anybody is welcome to come to that meeting. And we even have a neighboring school district that is interested in their board members and administrators coming. So it's a topic that is of concern with 1413 that Susan Goldhammer talked with you about. So I'm eager for you all to come and learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, 10.0 program evaluation. The gifted program evaluation has been postponed until November. So we'll move on to 11.0 old business. 11.1 update on enrollment.
Yeah, you have a new document to this agenda item that you don't normally have. You have the 5-year cohort enrollment projection tool. And if you're a veteran board member, you have seen this many, many times. Maybe so many times that when it gets put in front of you, your eyes roll a little bit. But to our new board members, I want to impress upon you that this is a bit of a Bible for us, if you will. We really go to and reference this document very, very frequently throughout the course of the year. And this data is driven by our official count day, which is the last Wednesday in September. So Wayne gets those numbers the last Wednesday in September, and those numbers are officially reported to the state on the official count date. There's another count date later in the year, but we use the September count date to plug into this formula. This is quite a statistical instrument that is used in many, many school districts. It's taught in graduate schools these days for administrators, and was taught many years ago as well. It has been very reliable for the Smithville School District by and large. Been very, very reliable. Wayne holds to this when he prepares our upcoming budgets, and we reference this, as I said, very, very frequently. So the new data is in from the last Wednesday in September. It's plugged in. You can see that in 2021, we're down 21 students, or 0.79%. In collaboration with my Northland colleagues and other school districts, Platte County, for example, is down 1.79%. So they're down a little bit more. Most of the other districts are flat, or they lost just a little bit, or they gained just a little bit, so roughly flat. So that tends to be the norm in our area in the Northland. I think for Smithville, it has a lot to do with what I call basement schools. You know, people in a neighborhood, due to their work schedules, get together and take turns in making sure kids are heading in the right direction with their studies, and kind of going about it that way to meet the needs of their students, as opposed to being concerned about hybrid or our virtual program, or having to go back and forth. You know, going into this school year, we had warned we may be in and out of virtual. We don't know what's coming. And so I'm guessing some families, you know, wanted to take as much control as they could in that uncertain environment. And you probably know of some families that are in that category as well, because we lost 21. And that, of course, is a net number. We certainly gained a lot, but some left, went on to other districts, and of course some did what I'm describing to you now. If you go back, you can see last year we started to kind of come out of a funk. We gained 49. Before that, we were pretty flat. Matter of fact, 18-19, we were exactly flat. And then just 4 students before that, and 5. When I came to the school district in the 2009-2010 school year, I want to say we gained like 140 students or something that year. That was a big year for sure, but it wasn't uncommon for us to be in that neighborhood leading up to the recession. And so once we hit that recession, well, 9-10, we were technically in the recession, but that was the last year of significant gain in the Smithville School District. We've never recovered from the recession in terms of being up into those numbers that we were before the recession. I think the housing market has a lot to do with that. When you think about the neighborhoods that pretty well built out by the end of that decade, they were big neighborhoods, and they were wrapping up by then. So housing certainly has a lot to do with it as well. So when you put in this drop, and if we were to go farther to the left on this sheet, you would see that early in this sheet, there's a year, well, we were minus 14 students. And if you went on beyond that, you'd find another year that we were exactly minus 14. So in the last probably, I don't know, 15 years, there's been a couple of years that we lost. They were both 14, down 14 students. This year, we're down 21 students. So it's not unheard of for us to dip, but it's not common. And then you plug that minus 21 into this formula, and it does all this calculation for you and gives you a projection down the road. And again, this has been a pretty accurate tool. These are just numbers. This is just a statistical formula. This formula does not know that there's a neighborhood going up behind our campus here. It does not know the neighborhoods that are plotted around the community. There's a lot it does not know, but it does know the growth of our students as they go through our schools. It does know that when you tend to get to middle school, your classes tend to break 200. And that once they get to that 200, they tend to just keep on growing, and we graduate about 240. And by the way, 240 would be among the top 3 biggest classes we've ever had. So that's a pretty good group there at 240, 241 exactly for this year is where they're at now. So anyway, I wanted our new board members to take a good look at this, and maybe that's a refresher for some of our veteran board members. But this is a very, very important tool that we reference throughout the school year, and it does a lot of work for us. So, and then you have the other 2 documents that you typically have related to student enrollment, and I can answer any questions you may have.
I guess one of my only concerns is, like, we are looking at 20, 30, 31, only going up 41 students total. But I know we've talked about possible new schools and stuff. Are we gonna need it? I mean,
Yeah.
with that amount of students.
Yeah, and your strategic or your master building plan is a living, breathing, fluid document. And when that plan's put together, it's best guess on when you might need these things, and we will have you review that plan many times. And it doesn't fit into a nice, neat box that we just decide this is how we're going to do it. We will be looking at this document and information like it to help us make those decisions down the road. Yeah, with this trending, no, you won't need that. You can push that out farther, which gives you the opportunity to continue to build your bonding capacity. So we won't put ourselves, as long as I'm your superintendent, I will not recommend you engage in the practice of, if we build it, they will come. We won't be doing that.
Yeah, to Susan's point, I mean, if you look at this, the high school and middle school are not really growing a whole lot. If this stays accurate, we're going to need space in the 3 elementary schools again.
We'll definitely keep an eye on it, and we'll keep this in front of you as we move forward, and keep you posted.
Like Dr. Shute said, this is just a tool. It is a tool that we use, but we've got a meeting with the city again the first week of November, November 3rd? Second?
No, maybe it is the 3rd.
I think it's November 3rd.
It's Monday.
It's the Monday before the election, so I think it's the 3rd.
That'd be the 2nd.
Okay.
Sorry, it's the 2nd.
Trust me, election day is the 3rd.
What is the day? Election day is the 3rd? Thank you.
How do you
Mike.
know?
So anyway, but the city will, at that point, they will tell us about the number of subdivisions that are planned. So, you can't just rely on this, because they're talking about the number of potential houses that'll be built. And with potential houses come potential kids into the district. So, you know, it's just a combination of everything. Based on the last 7 years, it will change significantly over time. It's a best guess.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions on the enrollment?
I got a question on the, just further investigating this. Let's say the 21, just for argument, the minus 21 is due to these basement schools. Next year it pops back up and maybe grows a little bit. Will that change in fluctuation give us a false reading in years to come if this is truly just a statistical analysis?
Well, if that number comes back up, the minus 21 comes back, let's just say to flat, right? Those 21 kids come back, well, then they're going to be shuffled in to whatever grades they're in. And so I'm thinking through your answer, because I don't know the answer to your question until I get to the end of my thought. So what this tool does, Scott, is it has a look back, and it goes back to statistically, it looks back where that class was, and it's really kind of complicated, but that's why it's called cohort, because it follows this group over time. So it would depend on what grades they land in, but I suppose that you know, if this is truly an anomaly this year, then it could, it's going to mess up for a year or two, but it's going to correct itself over time because it's going to use that time and that history to tell you what you're prone to do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, my concern is, and it just needs to be in our minds, is if the actuary takes into account the delta, and it's really basing it on a delta and a change, then these changes are going to give us a kind of a false picture for the next 2 or 3 years until we can flatten out that change.
Yeah.
So we don't want to knee-jerk just off this.
Right.
We think that this is due
Right.
to COVID rather than due to actual folks moving into the district.
But it'll take into account a bad year because it has a historical viewpoint, knowing that, well, that's just a bad year. And so in terms of how the formula works, and I couldn't begin to explain it, but I do know how it works, it can take that bad year and determine that this is not typical. And so it'll kind of flush, you know, kind of wash that out. Trends are important to this formula. It looks at how you're trending and then takes that into effect. So if you look at the year 26, 27, we're going to go up 2.06% based on this formula. Well, where in the world are they getting that? I mean, look backwards. The year before that, it's -1, -2, 3, 11, -29. Boom, 54. So it's looking at, you know, the look back goes quite a ways. So, but any year that's wonky is definitely going to have some kind of impact. Is wonky a real word? It is now.
Any other comments or questions on the enrollment? And just for the audience, 2,626 was the September 30th count, the official count that we submitted. Okay, moving on, 11.2, general financial review.
Donna was able to complete those documents and get those in your packet. And Donna so proudly announced earlier, celebrated the fact that she is retiring at the end of this fiscal year. So in honor of that, I believe for the rest of the school year, any general financial review questions you have should go to Donna. So you do have those documents and we can entertain any questions.
Comments or questions on the general financial review? This is info only, so
We are going to like.
yes.
Do you have a budget revision coming up here soon in your agenda?
Okay, we'll move on to 11.3, a COVID-19 update.
Yeah, I would like to spend some time on this topic this evening, and I have several people I'd like for the board to hear from. I have some comments, and then Denise Harwood, your new Director of Student Services. What a time to take over Student Services, and that'd be a brand new position and what we're working through. Denise is doing a great job, and so I'll call her up here in a minute. I want you to hear from your secondary principals. You know, they're the ones in the hybrid schedule. I want you to hear how things are going from them. Dr. Platt actually is in quarantine tonight, and we do have Mrs. Marchetti here, and so she'll fill in that role. So I want you to hear from them. You know, you've heard from Tanya Foster here this evening. You've heard from your friends, your family, your neighbors about their opinions on COVID-19. So there's a lot for us to consider, and right out of the gate, what I'll tell you as your superintendent, I do not have any recommendations for any immediate change in what we're currently doing. We do have low transmission rates at school, and Tanya knows that, number one, because I'm the one that told her that. We've got one. I can tell you one for sure. This probably happened in our school community, and it actually was in our office is where that likely happened. All of the other cases that we have, we're not able to tie it to a school community transmission. And so that's a good thing. I mean, that's something I'm celebrating. I think we are doing a good job in our school community. So when we have our kids here, the virus is not being spread here. It's happening in the community is where the transmissions are happening, where they're getting them. So I commend our students for following our protocols. I commend our teachers for their hard work in implementing the protocols. And so you've seen our numbers. Our dashboard now, we have 9 new cases, I think, right, Denise? 9 new cases, but it's our quarantines that are killing us. I mean, just killing us. Very, very challenging for teachers to keep up with these kids and all of these different modalities. And we've got this growing population of kids in quarantine. They're not virtual, they're not hybrid, they're quarantined. So it's like a whole nother population as a teacher that you have to keep track of and where they are and what they're doing. You know, and then how do you assess them? Your assessment plan for the kids that are hybrid may involve resources in the classroom, but you can't do that with these kids that are in quarantine. So that's a different assessment. It's just, you know, hearing from teachers and principals, you really get a sense of just how challenging it is with this high rate of quarantine. So I spoke with Gary Zabarak, the director of the Center for, I call it the Health Center. That's not really what, Clay County Public Health Center. So I spoke with Gary twice today. I spoke with him this morning with several members of our central office administration, and then we spoke again in the afternoon. And, you know, in speaking with Gary as the director of the health center, you know, he would tell you that currently the gating criteria for schools were all red. It's red. And if they were to follow that exactly, there's a 2-week window. Like, so they take 2 weeks of data. What's that do to it? Well, we're in the red. Then they take data for 2 more weeks. Then they apply it again. What color are we in now? So right now we're in red for schools, which really means we should be all virtual. They're not pulling the trigger on that data right now. They're really looking to a week from this Friday, what is that data going to be so that they could get a better sense of what the trends are. And Gary says right now we're trending in the wrong direction. And, you know, it kind of is what it is. The numbers, you know, speak for themselves. So we are administratively talking about what are the next steps, you know, I don't anticipate bringing you a recommendation, but again, guys, the landscape changes daily. But I don't anticipate bringing you a recommendation in the coming months that says, we want to bring everybody back and we want to bring them all back 100% here. Because if we had all of our students back in the secondary grades, we lose our opportunity to socially distance. And then the tracing, the contact tracing becomes, you know, we think we got a lot in quarantine now. If we're not able to social distance, I think that quarantine number is going to skyrocket because in classrooms, there are so many kids that will be clustered, you know, together. There's just nowhere else to put them. So really challenging time, but we're looking at what are some half steps we can do in between what we're doing now and what bringing everybody back face-to-face 100% of the time would look like. So we're working through some scenarios there. There's a couple of different options. That is, however, looking down the road. So I'm going to stop there and might give my colleagues a chance to visit with you. And let's start with Ms. Harwood, if you would step up to the mic and from your duties and perspective, if you could give the board a report on this, and then we'll bring up Mr. Winterbourne and Mrs. Marchetti.
Well, Dr. Schutz gave a lot of the information I was going to share. We meet weekly with the Clay County Public Health Center on a call every Friday. The district nurses, myself, Tim Davis, different members of the cabinet are invited, principals. We have a COVID team in our district that includes members of central office cabinet. It includes our building administrators, Jenny Fight from the high school, the athletic trainer, building nurses. Again, we're trying to include all of the people that lead other people and serve other people. So we meet weekly. The nurses also have an additional call every Thursday with the Public Health Center. So we're in constant communication. Children's Mercy Guides, really what our health department is putting out there. They are our counsel, I guess you would say, on behalf of the medical side. Our reentry plan is posted on our website. That is updated as soon as we get an update. The most common question we tend to get is about quarantining. If I get a COVID test during quarantine and it's negative, can I come back? The answer to that is no. And so that's really hard. I can empathize with parents, being a parent myself. It's hard when kids are missing out. I'm starting to get more calls at central office, you know, answering these types of questions, because there's no good answer for parents. You know, there's nothing satisfying about your kid missing 14 days of school. I can tell you that when we break it down, like Dr. Schutz said, we have 9 positives this week. We update our dashboard every Wednesday. So we go from basically Tuesday to Tuesday, and that gives us time to update it on Wednesday. And we had 87 new quarantines this week. And so that's a lot. Overall, we've had 87 positives for the year and 289 quarantine for the year. So if you look at a percentage, we have less than 1% positive for the size of our district, counting students and staff. And we have about the same for our quarantine. When we look at our numbers though, our elementaries are low. We haven't broken it out by school building. We're willing to do that on our dashboard. We've just trying to protect our students and staff. Their privacy is really why, but we're not opposed to sharing that out. So I'll go ahead and let you know. We've had, let me see, 2 positives at the elementary level, and we've had 20 quarantine this week. I'm doing this week's numbers. We've had 0 positive at the middle school and 7 quarantine. And then you had 7 at the high school and 60 quarantine. Well, that makes sense when you're looking at the older kids interacting. We can say that those students, what's happening in school or outside of school. I have a senior this year. I know very well what it's like having a student wanting to live life. She's on a team. She's in many clubs and activities. She works outside of school. She has friends. It's hard to keep them apart, but you know, we're just going to continue to ask that we follow those rules of social distancing, wearing a mask, you know, making good choices. I know her coach has been sending out, hey, state cross country's coming up, be careful, you know, what you're doing, and just those constant reminders. We've tried not to, well, It's really difficult in contact tracing. So what that means is when a student's exposed, they are within 6 feet of another individual for more than 15 minutes. That guidance has changed over the years since school started. It used to be 15 consecutive minutes. Now it's 15 minutes cumulative. It doesn't matter, throughout a day, 15 minutes. So that's been a big change that's hard to swallow. Another piece, we try to contact trace as far as where is a student? Is it something like, as a parent sick? Did a parent test positive, so I have to quarantine at home? Did somebody in my church? Wherever it is, we've had very few cases where it's actually been another individual at school. So we're feeling very confident, like Dr. Schutz said, that it's not being transmitted at school. He mentioned again that we've been working with Clay County. I will admit, I've asked, can we follow what other districts are doing? Can we just bring our kids back rather than quarantine? Gary said, as the director of our public health center, that would be malpractice. Those were his words. So it's very challenging, although we heard tonight, it's a recommendation. We also have to worry about our insurance carrier carrying us because we're not following the guidance of our health center. So there's lots of factors in place. I want to commend, though, tonight in front of you, our nurses and our administration. They have been working their tails off, especially high school. They've been tracking down kids. They make phone calls. When your student is affected, they say, okay, Corinne, that's my daughter's name, who were you around? They take that list and they have to follow all those students, ask them questions. They call every single parent and they try to make sure our students and staff are safe. It is taking all of their time and they are doing an excellent job. It's stressful, it's time consuming, but they are working very hard to keep our kids and staff safe. So I want to give them kudos for that because it's not an easy job. Jenny too, I should mention her. She's been a huge help for the high school and middle school when needed with all athletics. She's taken on that role. And so I'd stay in constant communication with those folks and they are working very hard to serve our kids. Any questions that I can answer before I turn it over?
I just had one. I know of all of the quarantine people we've quarantined. How many have actually then developed COVID?
Okay. So looking back at our data at that, like I said, we try to track, where did they get it? And to the best of our knowledge, we have said that 8 students and 3 staff members, so a total of 11, have tested positive after being on quarantine. So 11 individuals.
What's the breakdown? I know you said you don't have the official breakdown, but quarantine per elementary, middle school, and high school?
For the whole year?
Well, just.
I can tell you this past week because I have it written down. I could get you those numbers. I have a document, but for this past week, quarantine numbers for the elementaries is 20, and for secondary, it is 67. Now, this week was an unusual week. If you would look at our dashboard at our line graph, like the last week of September was an awesome week. Our numbers were low on both. Then we'll have a spike. And I can tell you in this case, there were a couple of big situations that affected a lot of people. So sometimes it just takes one gathering where several people are affected and then they have to quarantine.
And so our high schools and middle school, are they 3 days off too?
They are in school for
versa?
2 days and out of school for 3 days.
Okay, so I'm curious because I want to know why are we seeing such a huge quarantine spike in in-school 2-day class population versus elementary that's there 5 days?
My personal opinion, it's because our secondary kids are more social. Like we said before, most of this transmission's occurring outside of school. And so just depending on what's happening, activities, I don't want to make assumptions, but that would be my guess is our younger students are a little more.
Do you guys collect that information?
Say that again?
When you contact trace, do you collect that information?
Where are they contacting it? Is that what you're asking me, where they're getting it?
Yeah.
We do. We
Where's
ask.
the exposure coming from? The
We
suspected
do. We
exposure?
try. So like I said, most of them are from, they'll say unknown. Like sometimes they don't know. They just develop the symptoms and they test. So a lot of times they don't know. Sometimes it's reported to us that, like I said, one student said, well, I was around so-and-so at church. My mom quarantined last week. She was tested at work, was positive. a lot of it's family transmission. Like I said, sometimes we can say, oh, you were around, like the school transmission, we know automatically. I was around so-and-so that tested positive last Thursday. I was quarantined and now I'm positive. So we know for those 11 people, but a lot of them, they don't know unless they can trace it back to a family member, for example, or
Yeah,
if they were at a gathering.
the ones we put in quarantine, like our students,
Mhm.
you go back and say, Ian, I'm in high school. Ian was, he had a positive exposure. Okay, Ian, who are you around at school?
We do that, but
Is
we
that
don't
at-
do it outside of school because that's the health department's job.
Right. So how do you know, like, so is it happening where those 67 kids, were they sitting in a classroom? Were they sitting in the cafeteria that created that potential exposure that had to quarantine my 5 friends? What is that? What's that theme there that you guys are seeing? Is it from the classroom?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to decide how much I want to share because I just want to protect the confidentiality of our kids. It may be very few we've had to get out of class. A lot of them have been whether they've played in a sport together or they've been in a function together, an activity.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. Is it extracurricular in class or? And
The majority's been extracurricular.
Okay.
You know, having gone through this myself, the county, I got my call from the county to follow up on my case. I was 2 or 3 weeks after I'd recovered. They didn't ask a single question about contract tracing because at that point in time, there's nothing they could do with that information because I mean, it was 3 weeks ago that I tested positive, at least. So the biggest contact tracing that I was involved in, which was my conversation with our Director of Human Resources, Kim Davis, when we talked about where I may have gotten it and, you know, who I'd been around, you know, in the past 48 hours and so on and so forth. So, you know, and I'm not by any means or stretch of the imagination dogging on the county. I mean, they're getting the data they need and as quickly as they can, and they're just overwhelmed. But it wasn't a conversation of contact tracing with the county.
And Clay County would say schools are doing an excellent job because technically we trace back to 2 days, 48 hours prior to the symptoms. And so, you know, we're going off memory of individuals and, you know, I could have been around here. And so we're having to talk to various people. But once we make our list, we actually have to upload them, like all the demographic of the student. And then once we make a list of contact tracing, it really is up to them. If we had to contact trace everything they did outside of school, you know, it would take forever. And so we're really working in collaboration. If we get a big instance, they will help. But right now, you know, we're trying to take care of in our setting, you know, who are you around in our setting so we can take care of those students and staff.
And what is Clay County's official recommendation? Is it virtual? What is that official recommendation?
They don't give you a recommend. I don't know, Dr. Schutz, maybe you could speak to that.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, they have the gating criteria,
Right.
and that criteria is designed to provide that direction, but we're not following right now because it says go virtual. So they have approved our plan. And so they've not given us any other direction or recommendation to alter our plan. When I did talk with him a couple weeks ago about altering our plan at the middle school just to get his feedback. And he, you know, and I think I shared that with the board, is he was not favorable of that and requested we not do that.
Right. Last Friday's call, they mentioned that we are in the red. So they were doing Clay County, then they took out the Kansas City schools because that was that's a hotter area. And then we specifically talked about Smithville. Our community is having more spread right now in the community. It is red as well. Just because it's red, they said, are we going to make you go 100% virtual? No, not at this time. But it's very vague. We don't know, like, what's the magic number. They haven't given us that. Is there a formula we can follow? That guidance has not been given. They're just saying, we're red, but we're not ready to say schools have to go virtual. They wanted to give us some kind of, we heard earlier a comment about additional gating criteria, so some subjective. And so they've given us that. It's things like, are we using face coverings? Yes. We've been in buildings, our kids are wearing face coverings. Are we social distancing? Yes, to the best of our ability, we're social. Are we having proper hand hygiene? Are we doing cleaning, additional cleaning? And the last one is, are we doing contact tracing? So if we were graded on those 5 things, we're doing great. We're doing all of those. So there's really no, you know, qualitative or quantitative, I guess, measure that we can say yes. So right now it's red. We're in session, and until they change that. And again, they seem to communicate something a little bit more each week on those Friday calls.
I'm almost done, I promise.
It's okay.
Okay. I'm taking us somewhere, and I think it's important because I am empathetic. You know, I have a kid in elementary who gets to go 5 days a week, and I am empathetic to the parents who don't get to experience that at a higher grade.
Yep.
But I think it's important, and I want you to be pointed and speak to it. The difference in the variables between buildings and how they operate at an elementary level compared to a middle school and a high school level. And I think it's very important for our community to understand that, because my son gets to hang out with the same group of kids all day, right?
Correct.
High school structure and how it moves through that building is not set up that way. So can you speak a little bit to that?
I can speak to that. You know, our elementaries, the principals have worked very hard to keep their kids in cohorts. We call it cohorting. They are traveling together, they're seated together, they're in class together. So it's kind of their little family. So they stay together. I know they have different, you know, certain directions they walk in the hallway. They have certain restroom breaks and sanitizing stations. So that's one way that the elementaries, you know, can function. At the middle school and high school, those kids have a little more freedom because they have all different classes. You know, kids select their classes. They're all working in different directions. I believe you've worked hard to try to make some passing guidelines, and Rachel could speak to that better than I can, you know, how kids pass, you know, certain times, you know, when they restroom. I mean, we're keeping track of when kids are using the restroom even, you know, they're keeping track when they're going to a different room, just trying to be able to contact trace. But it is much more challenging. And also research does show that transmission with little children is a lot less than with once they're like 7th grade and up. So that is a fact that research has shown as well. It's just easier for older kids to contract the virus or spread it.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, going back on something that
Sure.
Ian said, we're seeing that our quarantine numbers going up are centering around extracurricular activities.
Some, yes.
Okay, I've picked up on that on the information that's being sent. It
Uh-huh.
seems like we've got 3 or 4 every time we have a quarantine, and it seems that way from the information that's being sent out, you know, by the district.
So for example, though, you know, let's say we had an activity and then kids decided to have a sleepover. So it's not as black and white as it may seem as well. If we were here tonight and one of you said, hey, I'm positive, you know, you two are sitting right next to each other, I'd have to really watch camera to see if you interacted with anybody else for a total of 15 minutes. And before long, it could be, you know, 10 people. So that's how it really escalates, you know, your numbers. Does that make sense?
It does. It just, when you see just the emails, it seems like, it sounds like the problem is coming from extracurricular activities, and from listening to your feedback, it's not coming from the classroom. And we just need to be very clear on what we know, where these quarantines are coming from.
Right. So one thing I will go back and check because I don't want to speak incorrectly, but I know legal counsel has really been, you know, advising us to be careful how we're speaking about that transmission in and out. So that's why I'm probably acting a little awkward about it tonight. I just want to make sure it's so new right now. And the last thing I want to do is expose a student, you know, to give away that personal, I don't want it to be identifiable with a student. And so I'm just a little unsure, to be real honest with you, how much to share, you know, where that is. We are collecting that data if we need it for the health department, but I would have to look at my spreadsheet to see exactly. And sometimes it's a best guess because individuals don't know. Of course, when you are on a team or in a bigger group, it's going to be easier to transmit that than if you're not in that type of setting.
Yeah, and I think in this forum, we can leave it to extracurricular versus in class, right? I feel like if we want to dive deeper into that, we can use our executive session for that, but it's something to keep an eye on. And I do agree that there has to be transparency around it, because we do have parents out there that are like, this doesn't make sense. Why are we not in here 5 days a week? And we say, well, look at all the kids we have quarantined, but that didn't happen in the classroom, right? And I'm not a proponent of 5 days face-to-face. I want to do what's in the best interest for the safety of our entire community and children. And I lend on your guys' recommendation, research, and expertise, because you're doing it every day and you're following up with these people every day. I'm not. But I do think it's important to hear what the community's saying. And I don't, I'll be curious to see what the survey data says in terms of across the board from parents, because I can tell you in my cul-de-sac, there's different opinions between 5 houses, right?
Right.
But I would be curious to see what that is and how we use that and combine all that and kind of collaborate with our teachers, our parents, and our health partners from the community. So I don't envy you. I appreciate everything that you guys and your staff and team and our administration and teachers are doing. I mean, I see the impact at home and what it does to my wife. So it's not easy, and I don't think it's going to get easier. But I do think we can keep working together and figure out what's best for our community.
I think empathy is the biggest thing we can do. You know, we have empathy for each other. We have empathy for our staff. There's really not a thing that we can do or give or provide, but understanding and grace during this time for everyone involved. It's a challenging time, and there's really not a thing you can put your finger on. It's just a stressful, challenging time for all.
You bet.
Any other questions for me before I turn it over to Rachel? Okay.
Thank you, Denise. Good job. And as Rachel comes up, I want to point out that Denise mentioned breaking out data by schools. That's something some other school districts are doing when they provide their current test. You know, here they are broken out by schools. But we're such a small district, or smaller compared to many. You know, we've been hesitant to do that, and we didn't want any school that might have, you know, some numbers that we didn't want it to look like, oh gosh, they're not doing their job, you know, keeping this contained. But the fact is, in our district, a lot of our numbers are at the high school. Kids are older, they're, as Denise said, more active, more social. Them being older, as the science would suggest, makes them more susceptible to the virus. And so everybody seems to know that the, you know, the numbers are larger at the high school. So we are moving towards a system that would provide a breakdown by school. That's just by removing that layer, it presents another level of transparency. And I see no reason at this point why we shouldn't go ahead and do that. So just so you know, that's the road we're headed down. So, all right, Mrs. Marchetti, how are things at the high school?
Okay, well, my name is Rachel Marchetti. I'm the assistant principal, one of the assistant principals at the high school. I have just some information to give you guys tonight, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. I'm going to kind of Cliff Notes version some of the things that we have compiled that we think are most important. So one of the first things that we did in preparation for this evening was to talk about our students and how they're doing compared to previous years. And one thing that I think is really important to note is that at the end of 7 weeks of school in the 2019-2020 school year, there were 232 Fs, 232 F grades at the high school. At the end of 7 weeks in the 2020-2021 school year, we have 450 Fs. So I did a little bit of math, which is terrifying, but I decided that it's important to note that our enrollment for the 19-20 school year was 917, and the enrollment for this year is 936 based on the September 25th data. So I did a percentage, so we're making sure that we're comparing apples to apples. So we had 3% of our grades at the high school in 2019-2020 that were Fs, and this year we have 6%. So I feel like that's very illustrative of the suffering that many of our students are doing right now. Something that we take very seriously, something that we're talking about all the time. We have developed some interventions that we're trying to put in place to help those students who are struggling while still staying within the recommended guidelines that the board has put in place for us. So we have an organization, well, every building has an organization or a group of people called the SST, which is our Student Success Team. And we meet frequently to discuss this very thing. How can we help our students, give them the most support and make them as successful as possible? So our SST about 3 weeks ago started really determining what our next steps should be with our students who are struggling. And we've created different tiers, which is very typical in school, multi-tiered systems of support of those struggling students. So to explain a little of what we're doing tonight, we've identified students in our building right now that have 5 or more Fs. Please keep in mind they have 8 classes total. So 5 or more F are our tier 3 students, meaning our highest need students. We currently have 26 students in that tier. Our tier 2 students, we have 3 or more Fs out of 8 classes. Those are our tier 2 students. We currently have 23 students in our building that fall into that category. So what we've devised is a plan. We are communicating with students. We are communicating with their parents about interventions that we are putting in place, and here's what they look like. We've piloted a few and have had some success, so we're hoping that we can continue this. For our tier 2 students, those are the ones with 3 or more Fs, we are having them attend after-school support on either Thursday or Friday, depending upon what day they are there. So they stay after school from 2:45 to 4:45 in a small group with a teacher or two to get some additional support and some assistance with their classes, whether it's organization, whether it's relearning something, just making sure they've hit the submit button on some assignments, whatever the needs are of those students. So that's for our tier 2. For tier 3, we've taken a more intensive approach, and we are requiring those students to come in on their hybrid days. So they are going to a classroom in our building. They are socially distanced. They are working with a teacher. They are there the entire day on the opposite days. So when they would typically be at home, they are coming in. Now that is only 26 students. And again, those students are our highest need students based upon their grades. Some other factors that went into these decisions were seniors who are at risk of not graduating, students with escalated mental health concerns, IEP students, et cetera. But that's kind of what we're doing right now to try to best assist the students who are extremely struggling. So I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out. I think another thing that's important to mention is it's not only our students who are carrying lots of Fs that are struggling, but our high achieving students who are learning differently and who are taking those AP courses, and things are done very differently for them. So I think it's important to point out that we have 51 students currently that have 1 or more F in an AP course. Now, what's important to note about this is that they have Fs right now, but based on past data, they have typically had a GPA that's very high. Here are the numbers. So 33 of those 51 are currently carrying a 3.0 or higher, never having had an F in a class before. 10 of those students have had a 2.0 or higher for their entire high school, and 1 student has had a 1.0 or higher. So of the 51 that are failing right now, that's not typical. They are wanting to drop these courses. We get daily requests from from students and parents of them wanting to drop these courses. They are worried about the implications that they're going to have on their GPAs. They're worried about the stress that it is creating when they're trying to juggle all these classes. We are holding tight and trying to not allow them to drop the courses because we truly don't believe that's in the best interest of them. But we are also very cognizant of the fact that there are bigger things at stake here than potentially allowing or denying a student to drop a class. So that's kind of our students. That's kind of how they're doing. That's kind of what we're doing as a result of how they're doing. And so those were some of the things that we thought it was important to share with you. I would be remiss if I did not mention as well that our teachers are struggling. We've talked about this, Dr. Schutz alluded to this earlier, but you have a teacher who has, let's just say, for example, 1 prep. They have 1 prep, and what that means is that they prepare for 1 class that they teach. Well, now with this one prep, you have your in-person students that you're with right now. You have a lesson for your hybrid students who are at home working on that same class. You have a lesson that may be entirely different for your virtual students who are 100% virtual. And now we have our quarantine students who are neither hybrid nor in-person nor virtual. So that one prep actually becomes 4 different lessons, 4 different manners in which you are getting that information to the students. So juggling that is a lot. And at the high school, our numbers are high. We've gone over that. It is heartbreaking to me every time we put an email out to a teacher about another quarantine student. And we've had to do that in the last few days in large numbers. So I think that's very important for you guys to consider as you make whatever decisions it is that you're making. And I think we've all kind of hit on that, but I don't think we can not continue to talk about that and not continue to have that dialogue. One other thing I wanted to talk about is just our contact tracing process. Just, you had asked a little bit about what happens with that. So when we have a person who tests positive, we see what extracurricular activities they're involved in. We get their seating charts from all their classes to see who they were potentially in contact with. We talk to the student and get a list, and then we contact all those students and parents. And then if it was indeed, we determine that it was a close contact and they need to be quarantined, at that point, then we send, and after we've spoken to parents, send an email to all of the teachers of that student, the counselor of that student, and the parents to try to all get on the same page with the date of the exposure, the date of the return to school, and then just managing that. We've got kids coming and going. We have a spreadsheet that we're constantly adding to, looking at. I'm almost obsessed with it now, to be really honest, because it changes things so quickly in terms of what you're doing in the day. Because if you have a positive case and end up having to quarantine, 10 to 15 students, that takes hours. So it just kind of shifts what you were either potentially working on or, had planned for that day. So those are just some of the things that I thought it was important that, and Dr. Platt and I, collaborated on this and thought that it was important that you guys knew. And one thing I did want to mention before I'll answer any questions that you guys have is that we are going to push back our grading, our final first quarter grades 2 weeks at this point because we started 2 weeks late. So just giving people an opportunity to get things turned in, giving teachers an opportunity to get things graded, all of those things. And we've talked about that with Dr. Schutz and the admin team at the high school and felt that that would be beneficial for all, just to have a little bit more time since this is also very new to all of us.
And really, the only reason you have a grade at the a reporting period for grades at the end of first quarter and at the end of third quarter is for eligibility for sports. That's the only reason that period is there. So what Rachel is referencing is some direction I gave to the high school today, and that take that reporting period that's been provided to you and push it down the road for 2 weeks to give kids more time to get their stuff together and teachers to work with kids to get their stuff together before it becomes an issue of, yikes, you're not eligible then to compete in sports now. So it just gives them a little bit more time in light of everything. But that 2 week window, based on the policy that's been, that's in the handbook that this board in the past has had a role in making that definition and how that all will work. And so it's still your rule. We're just pushing the deadline back a little bit in light of school starting 2 weeks later.
And I might mention that that is a Smithville School District policy, not a MSHA policy, correct?
Correct. That is
Okay.
a Smithville School District policy in practice. Probably it's more of a practice than it is a policy. Policy is established by the board. Practice is how we carry things out. So that is yours. And again, this board has had a hand in that and how that all is worded and how that works. And so if we were ever to make a change there, we would come to you and ask for your blessing and participation in making that decision. So yeah, in Misha, it's by semester. In Smithville, it's by quarter.
What are the students, what feedback are they providing on why they're getting Fs? What are they saying?
They're saying that they have a hard time learning on the days that they're home. They can't just ask their teacher a question and that teacher can get back with them right away because that teacher is teaching the in-person students. And so if they get stuck on something, rather than having someone in the classroom able to come over and help them get moving, they wait, they send an email, and then they might get back to that later once that teacher has had an opportunity to answer that. I think that sometimes we have to keep in mind that we're talking about 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old students whose parents may or may not be in the home when they are there. I know that I can speak for myself when I say that one of my children is doing just fine with that, but the other one would struggle with the time management and organization that it would take to be successful. So I think it's many factors. It's not like they're necessarily pinpointing one thing. You know, they've been used to doing school, how they've done school their entire lives, and this year is drastically different. So figuring that out, getting into a routine. I had a girl in my office yesterday who told me that she just really prefers paperwork. She just wants a piece of paper to fill out, to do her. So we talked about, you know, advocating for herself and talking to her teachers about if there would be an opportunity for her to get, you know, an assignment on paper versus on the computer. So I think they're just figuring it out. They're just changing what they have always done. And we're asking a lot of them.
Are you seeing the same thing for our kids that are deviating, who typically are high achieving students?
Would you say that one more time?
Are you seeing the same characteristics from our high achieving students that have Fs for the first time ever?
I think
Are
so.
they saying it's because of the environment? Is it, I prefer in person? I mean, what do you,
You know, I think that we have a mix. I think there are some students who are doing okay in their AP classes and maybe just fine. And then we have those that just require a little bit different type of instruction. We have all different types of learners. And some it's working okay for, and others they're struggling a little bit. And I think that goes across the board, whether you're high achieving or, you know, making C's and D's.
One thing with that, Ian, I have a high schooler taking 5 AP classes himself right now. Good student, struggling. One thing several things he's told me, high schoolers are used to AB classes. You know, how they do it in the high school is they have 4 classes one day, 4 classes the next day. It's a block schedule. So they would spend an hour and a half or so, in each class. Now we're asking them to spend 40 minutes in each class, twice a week, really. And then they're having to do every class every day. The students are trying, the poor teachers are they're overloaded. When Noah, he'll ask a question and, it comes back to, I think what Dr. Marchetti's right, we've got to work on somehow teachers cannot do quarantine in person and everything virtual because, if Noah asks a question, it might take that teacher a day and a half or 2 days to get back. Not the teacher's fault. It's because they're dealing with so many other kids. So I think, unfortunately, it's just been such a shock to them on changing the schedules and not being there in school to ask those questions. So I don't think it's necessarily anybody's terrible fault. I think it's maybe just the system and what we're doing. I don't know how to change that, but I do think we need to somehow help our high schoolers.
One other thing to keep in mind, and James and Sean, feel free to jump in if I'm not saying this correctly, but when we're doing our classes that are Smithville courses only, we can pare things down. We can slow down our scope and sequence. We can do things on our own timetable. Our AP courses and our dual enrollment courses don't have that capability. They are not run by Smithville School District. The timetable is set and they're moving.
Yeah, they have to take an AP test at the end of the course. And that AP test is going to cover the whole course, the whole coursework that was supposed to be covered. So the student is expected to know all of it. And so, our teachers are trying to cram as much of that in there as they can. So I think that puts that extra stress on them also.
So with our teachers, we said identify, our teachers who are doing Smithfield curriculum, identify your power standards. What are the most important things for your students to learn through this? But AP and dual enrollment courses don't have that option.
So we pared down their time in the classroom. We've effectively reduced their contact time with their teacher. And we're holding them to the same AP standards. And we're shocked by that we're getting Fs.
I don't think we're shocked.
I mean, to me, our task and our challenges is we have to find a better way. Now, I know that's easy to say, right? It's easy for me to sit up here and say that and say, go forth and find a better way. But I mean that. I mean, we have to figure out what stakeholder group do we need to bring together? How do we make it, how do you have teachers go out and plan for 5 different scenarios on one core class? That's ridiculous. How do we do that and expect them to be successful? So I don't know what it is, Dr. Schutz, but I do think it has to be a whole student advisory group, a teacher advisory group, an administrative advisory group. And if we have to look at outside the box, like lengthening the day and parameters on which teachers are here and do we bleed into 6:30 at night? What are those different ways we can meet those needs and reduce that amount of pressure, especially for our students? I mean, I feel for them. I don't know how we do that. And I feel for our teachers. I don't know. And you guys, I mean, you guys have to manage all that and absorb all that. It's a rough boat for everybody, but I just listened to several key indicators on why we're not doing good. And it's clear why we're not doing good. We see where the issues are. Well, now that we have them identified, what are we going to do to start course correcting them? That's what I mean, that's where I'm interested.
Well, and Rachel did iron out what the high school is doing now and bringing kids that are struggling in. I think that's step one. I have asked both secondary principals to engage in some conversations with their teams, with their staff on, what we need to do along the lines to what you're talking about, like what technology do we need? Document cameras and things of that nature can help kids pop right into the classroom while they're at home in quarantine. That's not the magic bullet, but that could be a part of that. In addition to that, we're big fans of the flipped model, the flipped teaching model, where the instruction is provided in terms of a video, and the student's homework is to watch that instruction, and then when they come to class physically, then they practice that instruction. They do that work.
Love that.
So I think the answer is a multitude of things. One of your speakers here tonight, Tanya Foster, one idea she has that I think is a great idea is a focus group. What more can we do? I know we do surveys, but let's pull some people together and sit down and talk about this, students, parents, and teachers alike, administrators, and get more of a collaborative effort on working through some of these solutions. And Tanya, in her communication, talks a lot about a half step towards that. At least take a step towards that 100% in-person model. So,
and I know Wayne's going to get up here and talk about the budget, but if it comes down to the point we need to consider additional resources, additional subs somewhere where we can help pull bodies in to feel. I think it's crazy that our student has to take a day and a half to get a response because we're working our teachers so much over in this direction, right? We can do better. And if it means we have to start baking in considerations around those financial components, I know that's a hard conversation when we're looking at a deficit, but those are conversations we got to have at a board level to say, does it make sense? Do we need to staff up and help? And I mean, we've known that we're all trying to work this direction, but to me, it's just becoming more and more clear that we identified issues, great, so we know where we're at, right? That's a good thing. Now we have to start changing it up to move us a different direction. We got to start doing something.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've talked and talked, and I think we have come to the point where we've got to just really outside of the box, just really, and I think a focus group is a great idea. You know, everybody can just get together to synergize and take ideas and go for it. When you live in that world every day, you maybe think one way, but someone that's not doing that can always have a good idea to look at what districts are doing around the area and who's being innovative. So I think that we are open to suggestions, to conversations, and doing all that we can to support our students.
Well, like I told Todd the other day, and I truly believe this, we are blessed to have everyone in their roles, including our senior administration. We see how hard you guys are working. And I'm not saying this is an easy, you know, it's easy for me to sit up here and say, let's do this, right? It's much harder to come up with it and make it actionable and be able to carry it out. I just want you guys to know, we see how hard you guys are working across the board, senior administration all the way down to the person who makes us lunch. We see that, and we appreciate you guys for it.
Thank you.
I want to go back to your collecting data for a second.
Yes.
Do we have data? You presented some numbers on those that are failing from this year as compared to last year at this time.
Mm-hmm.
How about data on course content? Have we covered the same amount in the vast majority of courses? Are we 50% down? Are we 75% down? Are we even on our courses across the board? Where do we stand on the content that we've been producing?
I think teachers have been instructed to pare down as much as possible. I don't know that we have a consistent percentage of what we've pared down collectively. I think it's a little bit different departmentally. I think it's a little bit different by teacher, by content. Some contents are a little easier to do in a hybrid model than others. So I don't really have, I can certainly look into it, but I don't really have a percentage of how much we've pared back as an entire staff.
I think that's going to become important, especially with those classes that build next year's build on this year. So you're out to 2001.
Sure.
Having that knowledge is going to be paramount as we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, my mind is, I'm racking my brain on what Dr. Credifell comments that she's made in the past on that regard. And, you know, Denise was real careful to give you information because she didn't want to give you the wrong information. I'm going to take a risk and tell you what I think Dr. Credifell said. We have Mr. Pickert in the audience. We have Mr. Logan in the audience as teachers, as well as Mrs. Guess at the middle school. So that perhaps they can correct me if I'm wrong. But I do agree with Rachel that there could be some variables there that would depend. But if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Credifell felt like we could get about, on average, 85% coverage in this model. Again, that may be high for some and low for others. But it's not the way we're doing it. We're not going to get 100% coverage. So, you know, some decisions need to be made on, you know, where do we cut, or how do, you know, it wouldn't be in the curriculum if it wasn't important to teach, right? You know, is it an AP class? Is it a dual credit class? Is it, so therein lies a whole nother chore that's very laborious. So, and, you know, one of the things that we've talked about tonight, but I want to be sure that, and I won't go on and on, but we've talked about it being hard on kids, you know, to keep up academically and otherwise. We've talked about how hard it is on teachers, but I want to be sure that we all understand that this is also hard on kids emotionally. You know, the criteria as to what necessitates someone being put in quarantine is very harsh and unforgiving. That's just how I feel about it. It's harsh and unforgiving. And so our kids, you know, and I've had a son in quarantine. I know Susan has as well. And I will be careful not to describe my son's experiences because they're his experiences and not mine to share. But it's tough. I mean, you're asking a 17-year-old boy, he's basically in prison for 2 weeks. And we want him to be healthy, and we want him to be safe above all else. But school was very, very difficult in how he was required to keep up academically. And, you know, just staying in your room for 2 weeks in a row at 17 years old is very, very, very hard. So it's hard on our kids emotionally as well. I wish, and it's one of the things that we spoke with Clay County about, I wish there was an opportunity for a more liberal application to the quarantine criteria. You know, the answer is that opportunity doesn't exist, that this is the criteria, and basically that is what it is. So that is something we're left to balance and manage as administrators, knowing that we're sending someone home that now can't compete in state at this or that, right? Have that conversation with that student or that parent. And I know you qualified for state this year, but you're now in quarantine and you can't go. Oh, it's your senior year. Wow, here's the quarantine criteria. That's the kind of stuff that is going on in high schools. And so, granted, we have to have a safe and healthy society, and we want our kids to be safe and healthy, but that doesn't mean this is easy. You know, it's really, really hard. So thank you, Rachel. Anything else for Rachel?
Thank you.
Mr. Winterboer?
First of all, I'd like to just say thank you to everybody, all the teachers, board, administrators. Like everyone has spoken today, it is a very difficult and challenging time. Haven't experienced anything like it in 28 years. However, I am very proud to be part of this district and all the work that everybody's put in. It's amazing to watch every day in our building what our teachers and our students are doing. And it's just, I would welcome anybody to come and watch and visit if they could. There's some really wonderful things going on each and every day, and it's because of the hard work and dedication that our staff has. So I did want to say that. As I was sitting there listening, there was a lot of good questions asked, and I wanted to speak to them. So now that I have the mic, I'm gonna take a moment to answer some of the questions I heard earlier. You know, Ian brought up the question about how is elementary different than secondary as far as the quarantine is concerned. And one of the things that I think is very, very important to articulate and understand is that I'm going to give a specific example that I dealt with this week. So we had a student that potentially was going to, who went home with potential symptoms of COVID. And so we did a contact tracing. And I was able to follow that student the entire day and go through their entire schedule of the middle school. And because of the protocols and the safety measures that we have in place, if that student would have tested positive, we would have only had to quarantine 4 students. Only 4. Because we can social distance. Because we can make sure we only have a certain amount of people at lunch. We have different passing times for our students based on teams. We have a whole bunch of protocols in place that protect our kids right now. If we were back 100% and I did the same contact tracing, we would have to quarantine over 30 students minimum with that same incident. And I think we're sitting here talking about how difficult it is for quarantined students, and I agree wholeheartedly. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have. I would hate to be in a situation where we're having to quarantine more and more because of decisions that we're making, and where right now we don't have to make those decisions because of the protocols and measures that we have in place. We all want all of our kids to be there 100%. That's why we join this business. We want to be with our kids each and every day, but we're also obligated to keep them safe. And that's the challenge that we have. And Rachel was right. We spend a lot of time. We have to look at video. We have to collect seating charts. We have to ask questions. We have to do all this. Anytime we even get a potential case, we start looking into it and contact trace and figure out what we need to do to protect our kids and what incidences that we have. So, I think that is something that I wanted to speak to and to help illustrate what could happen if we were back 100% versus what we're doing now. Another thing that was brought up, Scott asked a good question. I can speak to our school as far as how much classes are falling behind because of the hybrid model. And it does depend on the class. So some curriculums are secular. And because they're secular in nature, the teachers are not having as difficult of time keeping up with a past current pace of the class. So what I mean by that is they have priority standards they learn in second grade. They have priority standards they learn in fourth grade. Then they have priority standards that they learn in sixth grade and eighth grade. And all those priority standards are the same, and they build upon each other. And so when what they're doing in class now is they're able to use that secular model, pick out the priority standards that they really need to teach, and they're able to keep at a not 100% pace, but at a very good pace compared to years past. The challenges arise with the classes that are sequential, like math. So our math is behind. I'm just speaking honestly, because math builds upon each other. You have to learn this skill before you learn this skill. And so because they're not able to continue to teach the same way they always have, they are behind in the curriculum where they would currently be. So it really depends on the class and what and how the curriculum is set up. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit of an idea of how it's affecting our pace, but it is affecting the pace. It just is dependent on the classroom. So those were a couple things I wanted to speak to that you guys had asked questions about. Another thing is in the middle school, the culture is great. I'm being honest, it's positive. There's no drama. There is good, positive relationships being built. We have small class sizes right now. If we were all teaching in an ideal world, we'd have small classes every year, every day, every hour, but it's not reality, but it is right now. And because of that, and research would support that, you're able to go deeper. So another question that was brought up is why are students having Fs? What we've learned in the middle school and our data is showing right now is that test-wise and assessment-wise, our students are performing better than they did in the past. The reason they're struggling is they're not turning in work that they did in the past because the teacher was always right there beside them going, hey, you haven't turned this in, you need to turn this in. And that's not taking place because they're not here. So what we're finding in the middle school is the struggling grades are coming from the students not turning in their work. But the quality of the work they are turning in is as good or slightly better than what has been in the past. What we're hoping to see, which would be a true metric, is be able to look at something like our NWEA data, where we tested at the beginning of the year, and we'll test again right after Christmas, and we'll be able to see the growth compared to growth in the past. And that'll give us a little bit better of an indication what kind of impact this model is having on their academics. And so I'm really interested to look at that and really dive into that once we're able to give that test later in the year. So that'll be a good metric to speak to also. What we're doing at the middle school, our tiers are not as extreme as the high school. Our tier 3 kids are considered students with 2 or more Fs instead of 5 or more Fs. And we have 8 classes a day also. And this was a couple weeks ago that I collected this data, but it was 54 students with 2 or more Fs in the middle school. So that's not where we want to be. So we are thinking outside the box also to provide supports for our students and within the hybrid model. So for example, we have something called academic focus. Academic focus is the opportunity to call in struggling students on their off day, the day they're not in attendance. They come in, our teams are wonderful, and they manage that. They work with those kids, they help catch them up, they help make sure they get their work turned in, and we're taking advantage of that, and we've seen, we're reaping the benefits of it right now. We're seeing kids performing better because of that academic focus. The other thing we're going to look at starting is extra support Wednesdays. On our virtual day, we're going to reach out to parents and invite them to bring their students to school for our teachers to work with those kids in very small groups and provide extra supports while they're still teaching virtually. And that was an idea brought up by our teachers. They wanted to do that for the kids. And again, I was so proud of them. They stepped up and go, we need to find a way to better support these students. Can we do this and this? And so we brainstormed, we picked it apart, and we came up with a system. So we're going to start in the second quarter. And and the district has been very supportive of it, and we're going to be able to provide them lunch, and we're going to go through the whole thing to really support these kids and get them the need and the help that they deserve. So that's a little bit what we're doing at the middle school. Again, we're not seeing I'm not saying that not all the kids are doing wonderful, but what we're seeing in school is positive relationships, interactions, and way less drama than we see in a typical school year. I'm not saying that's exclusively because of the hybrid schedule, but the smaller class sizes would definitely be one of the reasons that is happening. So, questions for me?
Are you having as much quarantine and having the teachers having to do as much of that? Is that mainly the high school then?
Yeah, we've had one major quarantine incident, and that's it at the middle school. No, we have not had near as many quarantines, to be honest. It's just not a factor. And when we quarantine, so I'm gonna give you an example without naming names, but I can give you numbers. One team had 9 students on quarantine at one time. That's the most we've ever had. And so they did a lot of what Dr. Schutz said. They did a lot of the flipped classroom, or they actually live streamed their classes. So they actually allowed the student to join their class while they were at home and learn that way, so they didn't miss out on what was happening. So we had some teachers doing both of those strategies during that quarantine. The second most we've had is another team had 7 quarantined. Same incident, different team. So that gives you an idea of the amount, but that's the most we've had quarantined at any one time.
Thanks.
This kind of goes to both of you. When I heard, Rachel, when I heard you talking about the plan for the Thursday and Friday lengthened day, the first thought that came through my mind was, what about Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? And I don't think you would get any issues from anybody up here, about compensation or anything else, that if we need to do what we have to do to make sure these kids are succeeding. If it was 23 kids at level 3 and 23 kids at level 2, that somehow we figure out how to get half of those kids on one of their days off and the other half of the kids in on the other day off, just sitting here going through my head what we could do. And then, there's nobody here, no students in the school on Wednesdays. And I heard Mr. Winterbore say that, they're looking at utilizing that Wednesday in a special way. But, and I was sitting here watching Sean and the other gentleman over here when they were talking about the students not turning in their work, and both of them were shaking their heads. Well, how do you force them to turn in their work? It's a responsibility, it's a maturity, and they have to understand the consequences that, you know, we don't want them to fail, but there's a reason that some of them are, and it's just sheer laziness and not doing or not turning in the work. I mean, it may be done, but just not turning it in. So how do you deal with that? That's a tough one.
We have a lot of phone calls home to parents. We have a lot of emails to parents. This is middle school. I'll just tell you what they do. There's a turn in or submit button, and a lot of our kids are clicking the turn in and submit, but it's blank. They haven't done a single thing. They're turning it in blank, and then they tell their parents, yeah, I turned it in, I submitted it. Well, you didn't do anything, it's blank. So that's one way that our challenges that our middle school teachers are dealing with. But I do want to speak to this. This is interesting too. It's been getting better. So again, I think one of the issues that we fought is that these kids came back and thought, well, school is going to be like it was last spring. And last spring, all we were doing is trying to get and keep the kids engaged. It wasn't about mastery and it wasn't about their grades. It was just simply about participation. This year, it's about mastery, it's about learning, and now there's grade impact. And so that's new and different. And so we've had to, for lack of a better word, we've had to train the students that hey, when you don't turn in an assignment, there is a consequence, like Danny said, and it is going to have an impact on your grade. And so our number of incompletes have gone down the last few weeks because, first of all, it's getting close to the end of the quarter. But secondly, the students are learning, oh, yeah, it does impact my grade. I got to get this in. And that was just something new and different because this is a new and different way to learn. And it's completely new and different for everybody involved. And so we have seen a better turn-in rate over the last couple weeks. And we attribute that just to learning and becoming comfortable with the system and learning those things and habits they need to do to be successful in that system. You know, when you've learned for 7 years of your life in one way, and now you get thrown a brand new way and you've got to learn to adapt. And that's just for middle school. You know, you have seniors who've learned the same way for 12 years and now it's completely new and different. So those are challenges. Yeah, thank you.
Following some of the discussion we had in our pre-meeting yesterday, we're going to find out here in the next 6 to 8 weeks how, because the Platte County School Board just last week approved their middle schoolers going back 5 days in person on November 30th, and their high schoolers will go back to start the second semester. And they've got a lot of things to work out before that happens. But I think we're going to find out real fast the results or the consequences that go along with that plan. Not saying either one of them's right or wrong. I wish them the best of luck with it. But they are taking a chance, and we'll see how it goes.
And I met with all Clay and Platte County School District superintendents today, and they are the only ones making any change at this time. So the other districts are looking at this right now in the same way that Smithville is, or at least that I am.
Any other comments or questions on the COVID-19 update? Okay, moving on. New business 12.0, 12.1, FY21 second budget revision.
All
Mr.
right.
Kruger.
Mr. Kruger.
I'm pretty excited because typically I'm the most depressing part of the program, and I'm more uplifting than your last topic, I guarantee it. Well, it's tough. It's tough.
I'm actually looking forward to this.
You're looking forward to this, so I'll answer any questions and I'll go into as much or as little detail as you would like me to do. But this is a very common procedure. That we do a budget revision typically in the fall, and we usually do that. You Your fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. You approve a budget before the fiscal year begins as required by law in June, typically before you have a lot of the data in order to that really, that builds the budget, such as your assessed valuation, knowing where your teachers are, knowing what your student enrollment is, what summer school ADA is, a lot of the different expenditures and so on and so forth. And that's what's been done. So this budget basically is a revision of your preliminary budget that you approved on June 24th. And we have gone through the process of doing all those things. In the preliminary budget, for example, we projected 3.5% growth in assessed valuation. Well, then it ended up about 3.73%. So we made that adjustment. If you recall, because of COVID, the governor withheld funds at the end of last year and projected additional withholdings in this year, and that it's happening. Again, that's been updated in here. The preliminary budget projected a deficit of about $822,000 in the preliminary budget. This budget that's been revised after we've kind of gone through all the things that we've gone through is still projecting about a $585,000 deficit, but there's still almost $400,000 of state aid withheld in this budget. I don't know if you all saw, but the governor has actually called a special session first week in November to come back. The state economy is actually doing better, and there is a surplus of funds that need to be expended. And the special session is going to work through the details, and they've already indicated that K-12 public education will be the recipient of some of those funds. So, you know, possibly that $385,000 that's been withheld in here will creep up a little bit. And so instead of having, you know, close to a $585,000 deficit, it will chip that down a little bit. This week, we just actually submitted a FEMA disaster relief proposal, and we were able to get those totals up to about 160,000. Initially, we thought that was going to be around 100,000. We got it up to 160,000 when we baked in all the some of the stuff related to, it's all related to COVID and our response. Right now, I'm guesstimating about 220,000 is what we spent on COVID in preparation for this year, whether it be virtual personnel, personal protection items, so on and so forth. About 220,000 is where we're at right now. And again, we've got some reimbursement from the CARES funds from Clay County and the city. And again, the rest of that, which is about 160,000 remaining, we're submitting to FEMA. And we are potentially going to get about 75% of that back if we are successfully approved for all those expenditures. Again, those dollars are not in here yet. The expenses are in here. You know, the additional, the staffing, for example, for virtual learning, that's in here. And actually in the supplemental pay, if you noticed in the supplemental pay that you approved tonight in the consent agenda, actually had those stipends for the first semester virtual learning. And the reason it was in there this month is because we had to get that paid to submit it for the FEMA grant. So that's why it was, quite frankly, in there this month. So again, I'll answer any questions that you have. I would like to point out, and it was a great suggestion, but end of last June, I met with Scott and we went through some things. And one of the suggestions was that we do in the budget summary, while it was always in there, it wasn't maybe as clear as it needed to be. We've provided a historical analysis for all the line items in the budget summary that includes actual expenditures by line for the last 3 budgets, and then the projected current, and then last year's actual. So you're able to kind of see trends on some of those different line items on how the expenditures and revenue sources are breaking out. For example, like on the revenue section, you can see that from last year, to this year, the projections are pretty much the same as far as state revenue. About 37% of our state revenue, our money revenue, comes from the state. But you can see a significant increase in local revenue. And again, that's because of that 3.73% increase in assessed valuation. Huge increase in county funds. And again, that's because of the Children's First Fund and those funds that have been dedicated to that program. Federal funds about the same. It'll change a little bit because we'll have to potentially, I hope, bake in some of those FEMA dollars, and that will move the needle. But again, my recommendation is that you approve this. It's just an update from the original document. Likely this year, because of COVID and FEMA dollars and CARES Acts and et cetera, we may bring you another revision in March, and then a final revision possibly in June. Well, there will be a final revision in June. I know that for sure, but I anticipate another revision in the spring, just because there's so many moving parts right now. So my recommendation is that you approve the second budget revision, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
So this budget does bake in the fund transfer, right?
Yes, yes, thank you.
So that is
yes.
baked in there?
Yeah, that was another thing. So we couldn't, in June, we couldn't put that in there. What was approved in August, we put that 10 cent transfer in here. And I think I actually included in the highlighted bullet points the amount of revenue that generated.
270.
Yeah, the revision, about $270,000 was what that 10 cent transfer generated in additional revenue.
And so that's baked in with the deficit of 580,000, right?
Yep, yep.
So best case scenario, the additional funds, grants, et cetera, come through. What's our offset look like?
If the state of Missouri steps up, we get the FEMA monies, we'll be less than a six-figure deficit. We'll be under 100,000. If assuming we don't have a bunch more COVID-related expenditures, I say that because right now I've not included any second semester virtual learning cost. I still have in here some revenue for activity receipts for the winter activities. I talked to Mr. Schaefer, and in all honesty, we probably will not be taking gate at basketball. We probably will not be taking gate at wrestling, for example, at the high school. We're not taking middle school gate anymore at all anyways. I still have those revenues in here. I'm gonna have to back them out. COVID. I've already backed out all the fall revenues, about 80 grand. Expenses are still there, but those revenues are not.
So and typically you come in very conservative. What would you say is a safe bet off that 580,000 adjustment that we could expect to receive? Would you say that needle moves to 400,000? We'll get a better picture in March.
I'll have a better picture in March. Again, it'll depend a little bit what happens in Jeff City first week in November. I feel pretty good about the FEMA money, that will bring this down. I think you'll be below 250 for sure, unless something happens unforeseen. I think you'll be below 250. And which is exciting news, because again, you started at 822, and to be able to whittle that down that fast, that quick is really a good thing.
So 250 is the over under.
Yeah. And again, that 10 cent transfer was huge for the Smithville School District.
So would you recommend that we get our signs made for tomorrow afternoon, since the mayor or the governor is going to be in town for a ribbon cutting, and ask to
fully fund K-12 public education?
Return the funding that was withheld from last year?
Well, that's not going to happen. That's gone. What they need to do is just fully fund this year. They need to fully fund this year, because right now they're only paying on the payment transmittal. They've been ratcheting it up every month, but they're only paying about 83% right now of what we're owed. They're only paying about 83%. Each month that goes up, They hope, and this budget is based on a 96% payment. So we need to get that back up to 100%.
Any other questions on the budget revision?
This is the best news we've heard from you in a long time.
There you go. There you go. It is good news. It is good news.
I do like the way you, this front page here, I found it very understandable to read the summary, the bullet point. So thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Still depressing, but thank you.
Okay, if nobody has any other comments, I will accept a motion in a second to approve the FY21 second budget revision as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the FY21 second budget revision as presented. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kruger. 12.2 Early Separation Incentive Plan. This is one of the items that was moved down to follow the budget revision discussion. Dr. Schutz.
Yeah, I think Scott and Susan, as our new board members, have asked some good questions about this program, and not to put words in your mouth, Scott and Susan, but I think they've got a pretty good handle on what this is about. The veteran board members are very familiar with what we're trying to do here. So we recommend participation again for another year, we being myself and Mr. Kruger as the CFO. So what the board, you can choose to support that recommendation or not, and you can choose to take action in favor or not, either this month or next. We would have to know by your November board meeting. Certainly if you feel comfortable acting tonight, that's great. We can get started early. But if you need to wait, we can do that too. $135,000 is what we estimate we would save.
Anybody have any other questions about the early separation? Does anybody have any issues with taking action tonight, or do we want to further investigate and push this back until the November meeting? Or
I don't have a problem taking an action on it tonight. 135,000 is quite a bit of savings. I do want to make it very clear, though, that we may not offer it again next year, depending on the actual savings analysis next year. It's just not something we can do every year, just blindly. So, but 135,000 is quite a bit, and we are digging ourselves out of a hole still. Even if we come close to breaking even, we still have to dig ourselves back into our reserves. So my two thoughts.
I agree.
I was going to make a motion, but I'll wait.
are we ready to take action tonight? Do we think we're ready to proceed with approving this plan? With again, the feedback that this will be a year-by-year decision based on the needs of the district, and it's not a guaranteed plan moving forward. Okay, with that being discussed, then I will accept a motion in a second to approve the plan for the use of the early separation incentive plan as we have taken the last 2 years.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the use of the early separation incentive plan for the FY 2021 school year. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. 12.3, new course recommendation.
Yeah, I'm glad Mr. Pickard is here tonight. He can help us answer questions since Dr. Cradafell is not here. But what this situation seems to be as this class in the past from time to time was offered as an independent study. And what an independent study is you may have a student that's advanced through some courses and is really kind of done with, let's say, physics in this case. And I've kind of taken everything that you've offered and you know, what else can I do? You know, Mr. Pickard, for example, I really love this topic and I really want to explore it. Well, what Mr. Pickard may decide to do is say, you know what, you could do some exploration in this area of physics and you can explore this and this will be your general direction. At the end of your time with me, I want you to be able to accomplish this. And so it's kind of more loosely defined as an independent study, but it's under the direction of Mr. Pickard in another class that Mr. Pickard teaches, so it doesn't take a teacher out of an additional section. So as Dr. Cradafell has described to myself and actually Sarah and Denny as well, is that this started out as kind of an independent study scenario. And then from time to time, students would use it as independent study. Because it was independent study, it wasn't thought of at the time. We're awarding credit for this course, so we need to run this through the board to get it approved as a course. Well, this semester, this year, we have several students that are on the same path. And again, Mr. Pickard can correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm sure there's some places where I'm wrong. And so we have several students on this path. And so here we've got a whole section, a whole class. Now we have a class that is for this group, and they need they need now this course to be approved. So Michelle came across this. It was believed that because this was independent study in the past, well, we've done this class before, so it wasn't known that we needed board approval. So we missed a step, and we're trying to back up and correct that step. And I know Mr. Pickard and Mr. Haggerty also had some correspondence today. And so, Jim, why don't you come on up and correct my misstatements, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions as well.
Jim Pickard, I teach physics here at the high school. The main point that I'm bringing up in terms of the course right here largely has to do with the designation as an AP course. So the physics section that we have is kind of twofold. You have Physics 1, which is kind of like it's a little bit more of a conceptual focused investigation into physics and the different concepts. There is obviously a mathematical backing to it, but in recent years, the AP program has focused a little bit more on the conceptual physics model, where we can actually have some like qualitative analysis of the various equations and like what they mean, and how you can represent those different motions and physical processes. Okay. I also do have a calculus-based AP Physics C course. Part of the reason I'm trying to differentiate between the two is now I have more physics students who are going from Physics 1 and then go in further towards the Mechanics C, which is more geared towards a university physics for a student who's going into a physics major or an engineering major. And they would need separate designation for that one. I'm also looking to get Physics 1 formally labeled as an AP course so that we could get actual like weighted GPA or like distinction credits for that course, because it does have more rigor than a standard, like the kind of physics you would do in, say, physical science, which you take your freshman year. We kind of extend off of those topics in this class. I sent, and I believe I sent to Mr. Haggerty and Dr. Schutz both my syllabus and the course and exam description for the AP Physics 1 course. They're pretty closely aligned, and so I think that recategorizing my current physics class in that way and getting board approval for that would be the best course of action for my students. So I can take any questions that people have about the class and the need for this designation as you like.
Excuse me if I missed it, but how many students do you actually have?
Currently in
this?
physics this year, okay, so I believe I am at, because it always starts out and then someone sees the formula sheet and we get a couple that leave it within the first week. But right now I am at, so I got 2 virtual, and I believe total I have 29 students in my Physics 1 class. I only have 2 in the Mechanics C section, which is why I don't have an actual formal AP Physics C course, and I just have a couple of students that are doing independent study, but I'm basically working with them as virtual students. So I do kind of have 4 preps this year, not trying to play a little tiny violin right here, but yeah, so it's looking like 29 for the algebra based and then 2 for the calculus based. And we've had enrollment going up, it seems like, over years for the Physics 1 course since I've started here. Not to now brag on myself, but.
Well, I can see the.
Thank you for your correspondence, because that made it completely clear.
Oh, good, good.
Before I was kind of confused, but after that email, it's crystal clear to me.
Excellent.
Thanks.
I could just see the more that it's offered and the more that it's out there, that the calculus base would probably have an increased enrollment as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, in the past, I have actually kind of taught them concurrently, even though it's more recommended that Mechanics C be like a second-year physics course where you have like the concepts in Physics 1, and then we dive a lot deeper into the math and actually, well, it's a calculus-based course, so it goes a lot more into the weeds on how you can actually investigate motions and much more complex models than we do in the algebra-based course. So in the past, I had done it like side by side. You can kind of just supplement the concepts with the algebra-based or the algebra-based concepts with the calculus models of motion. Well, I can't really do that now because I have students who already took those concepts in that first course and are now having to take an entirely separate course with more math backing. I don't know where things go beyond that if they wanted to do more, but this is where we're at right now.
University level.
Yes.
Any other comments on the new course?
I just want to say thank you. My son's in it. I can attest that it's very tough, worthy of AP, but I appreciate all you're doing too. You're doing great.
Well, the good news, and I tried to make that stress out to my class today, but I am trying to backpedal. It's really tough in the physics world to not go back into your old habit of just basically making physics a second math class. And I don't want to do that. I do want to show how the math is important, but just making it so that they see the concepts and the actual processes that are going on, I find is helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
With no further discussion, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the new course recommendation as presented in our packet.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the new course recommendation. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Pickard, for being here this evening. Really appreciate your time.
12.4 policy revisions.
Yeah, you have, I believe, 19 policies here. You've got a bunch. I was visiting with Scott at the new teacher reception. We had some good conversation, some good points that he brought out. I know you have 3 readings, so you have you would be voting tonight on the first reading, so you would approve the first reading, but you're not approving policy. So these would not be becoming policy yet. So you could always pull these back out in the second and third reading and hash them out further and delay their adoption as you get to know the policies better. But still, Scott and I talked about, it might be a good practice to get these in your hands prior, to give you more than, let's see, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, give you more than 5 days to really peruse these and become comfortable with them. So that's something Donna and I can easily do. We know which month we're going to bring these to you. We can get them out to you in advance, and that may be I'm sure that may be helpful for some of you. Also, Scott pointed out, as you go through the policies, you'll see common language that says, like in parentheses or whatever, insert district name here. So what that is, this is the MSBA standard policy, and we would, in that scenario, likely not have any custom language for that policy. And so what happens through this policy, for Susan and Scott, for those of you that may not remember, is you'll see that same language in there for the second reading. And Scott, you'll even see it for the third reading. You're adopting the policy, the context of the content of the policy. And then when it's published, that will be filled in by the policy editor, Smithfield School District, and anything else that's kind of a fill in the blank. You got, again, 19 policies here. There is a policy that talks about the board will establish an amount that is acceptable for gifts. That is new, if you had a chance to study that a little bit. And so that policy says the board will do that. And my feeling is that let's get this policy adopted after 3 readings, and then we'll come to you in a board agenda item, and then you can have that discussion on how this board wants to handle that. So those are my items off the top of my head about these policies, and I'll turn it over to you for your questions and comments.
Well, for the second time today, I'll take the opportunity to throw a dig in and say thank you, Donna, in advance for getting these policies out, since he just volunteered you to do that.
I said Donna and I.
I know, just like my response to you earlier today. Thank you, Donna. Any comments or questions on the policies that are presented for the first reading tonight?
Yeah, I'm curious about JCC. I'm just at a loss when I'm reading it. Just hoping for some clarification.
Okay. JCC, gotcha. Pulling it up now.
Some about paying tuition to receiving school district or charter schools.
Yeah. Point me to the
It's the new all highlighted part where it's the transfers due to accreditation status. And they took out the loss of accreditation. I'm just.
Yeah. Bottom of page 3. Yeah. I don't know what it's telling me. I think the most important part here of this paragraph is the very 1, 2, 3, 4 words, in accordance with law. That's the gist. So and then the other thing is, if the state board declares Smithfield School District unaccredited, then we get into a scenario where we may be responsible for tuition to other districts. And that has been, discussed for several years. And I'm not sure about 604 and what specifically changed, resulting in this policy revision, but that concept is not foreign. So, the quality of this community, I wouldn't anticipate us being in a scenario where the Smithfield School District was unaccredited, but if we were, we could end up in a scenario where we were actually paying tuition. Now, I do not, we could get into a long discussion about districts that do struggle, right, to achieve, have their students achieve at a certain level, and a lot of times urban districts have these struggles. And so that's kind of where a lot of that fight is, where you open the borders between school districts, and that's that push that we've been dealing with in Jefferson City for several years now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just read it and it just said Smithville R2 school district unaccredited. And I didn't think I would have assumed would have said if to become unaccredited. And I just kind of got
in accordance with
confused
law
there for a second.
If the Missouri State Board of Education declares Smithville, and if we ever got it to the point where we had to pay tuition to another district, we would just take it from the board's salary.
Wait, it's not mine.
All for one and one for all, right?
Yeah. Good question, Wade.
Any other comments on the policy revisions? So we come back for our November meeting, take a chance, study these a little closer, and we'll see if anybody has any questions on a second reading. Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve a first reading of the policy revisions as presented in our packet.
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the first reading of the policy revisions as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. 12.5, broadcast of board meetings.
Yeah, this is kind of, in my opinion, a high-level discussion, and it's 9:50 at night. If I may, I'll kind of present to you some areas where I need some direction, and then you can kind of think about this, and then we can bring it back. So really, the question I need the board to answer is, what is your vision, long-term vision, for the public to access your meetings virtually? So, and previous boards have talked about broadcasting meetings, making them available online. And so that was a discussion that was had. And there really, before COVID, there were two camps. And some people felt like, we need to be transparent. We need to make everything available, as easily available as possible. And then there's another camp that talked about, that can be a lot of pressure, for board members and administrators in that environment. And you could say something be taken the wrong way. And so there's, some potential legalities with that. I don't think those really held water at the end of the day. But so there's two ways to look at it, right? So now with COVID, and so much of our world being online, and I mean, many of us, I'm sure, sit in multiple online meetings every day, does that raise the level of expectation for people to long-term have access to your board meetings virtually? I mean, in the comfort of their home. So do we want to long-term stream your meetings to the public? We need to know that, because we have, and we don't have to know tonight, but we have kind of piecemeal this together. The best way for the Smithville School District to stream your meetings is if you are all on, we have Zoom now, but Zoom, Google Meet, everybody's in their own little space doing their Zoom or Google Meet. And we push it out that way, like we did last month, okay? That's the best way for us to provide for proper sound, the best production, if you will. So if we want to keep going this direction and providing things virtually, Robert and I need to come up with a plan where, for example, your gifted program evaluation was postponed for two reasons. One, Dr. Cradfield isn't here, but more importantly, your gifted teachers preferred due to COVID, preferred to come in virtually. Well, having some people virtual and some people at home, we're not set up to do that. We could be, with the right equipment, the right setup, and the right planning, we could be, but we're not now. So where do you see us going, and in what direction would you provide the administration? Robert, what would you add to that?
No, great feedback from tonight's meeting, from people outside the district, having you on stage without the mics, giving the, the feedback and the noise. So this setup's been good. The hardest part of having somebody come in virtual with this setup is the only sound you're going to have is the sound through these mics. So when you get somebody coming in, let's say they try to do it through a Google Meet or Zoom, you'd have to put the microphone up to your laptop to hear them talk, to get that through there, because it's not going to take the audio from your laptop. So this area is designed for play productions, not for video streaming. We do the accommodations as good as we can, but the easiest way is just everybody Zoom or everybody all. We're trying to do hybrid. It has its issues just like it has in schools. So I'll leave it at that.
Robert, is there any way to tell, I mean, I know we can tell, but can we be told like how many people are actually watching? How many, when
We can.
happen?
Gavin, how many attendees tonight? Okay, so there you go. At the high point, it was 15 and only 8 right now. So
It's interesting to know like how many people are actually, when we are streaming it, how many people are watching it, yeah.
So to make sure I know what we're talking about, are we talking about getting all the equipment we need in order for us to be here, but people join online and meet with us, and yet it's also easy for everyone to hear what we're talking about, both? So
Both to stream and where we've got adequate sound.
where we can be anywhere where we want and make it work, basically.
Well, we would pick a room. Yeah, so like the district office was your board room for many, many years, decade. We wouldn't probably pick that room because it's too small, the social distance. But pick a room where you can provide the appropriate sound that would allow us to broadcast, to stream to homes, and then also provides for some additional opportunities for like the gifted teachers wanting to join us virtually in this meeting in a way that could make that work.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I've tried watching other school board meetings and the same setup, and it was just hard to hear and kind of frustrating. You always seem to miss out on the important parts that they're talking about. So I think it's good, and we need to do it for the community and make sure we are making it as easy for viewers and our constituents and parents and students who all want to participate and be a part of this. I mean, that's just my take on it, though.
And so I heard 8, there's 8 watching. So I'm sure at least 6 of those are some of your spouses that are wondering what time you're going to get home. So talk to your spouses and.
I think that would be up to the tech department though to figure out what room's going to work.
Oh yeah.
What equipment we need, but it sounds like a good idea. I mean.
What would be the cost on this? Are we talking cost or?
Yep.
We had the high school cafeteria. It seems to be the prime space because we battle with this space with our play production. We had to kick them out to get this set up tonight. So $28,000 was what the cost was to get the high school cafeteria with all the audio equipment, cameras, everything, TVs on the side, the whole deal to make it a broadcasting area. So and that was probably a little high. We probably could scale that back on stuff they put in there, but they put everything in there.
So if we're looking at those expenses to improve the cafeteria, could that area be utilized during the day to kind of counter or offset those for different things besides lunch?
Sure. So outside of lunch, you could also use that area for a classroom and have them use that to, that same equipment. So it could be used more than just the board meetings. So, yeah.
Well, and it's used for community meetings too. It's become a very popular meeting space, which is why we got that electronic drop-down projector or screen. So we're really rolling with it. The high ceilings makes it a really good space. Sometimes you got to bring in some more comfortable seating, but it's a really popular room. Used for a lot of different groups.
Can we claim this as COVID related?
Yes, yes, we could. We really wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for COVID, so.
I think as long as we had a dual use for students, we could. If it was just board meetings, probably couldn't, but if we, dual use for students, we absolutely could, so.
Well, I feel like I have your blessing, and unless you tell me otherwise, we'll move forward with that. Okay.
Okay, we're looking at 12:6 MSBA recap. We are at 10 o'clock. Does anybody have anything that they would like to provide on their experience with the MSBA virtual conference this year?
I definitely prefer in person. One that I was in a lady's son for about 30 minutes. Didn't know she was on she thought she was on mute and she was singing, so it was in a, I probably got through one that I got to listen to fully and without any interruptions so it was good. I learned a little bit, but not as beneficial as it been in the past, for
Well,
sure.
if you have noticed, though, through some of the MSBA correspondence, they are releasing two of the classes each month for basically virtual training. So they are going to play the recordings of those ones that you might not have made it to, or one that you were participating in that they had I had two that had technical issues, and the presenter lost all microphone halfway through, and one of them happened to be on collective bargaining. So just trying to get a head start on a refresher on that, and halfway through the conference, halfway through that session, they lost the microphone. So they are supposed to be offering those on a monthly basis. They're going to release a couple each month, so those will be coming out.
Feel bad for Susan and Scott. That was their experience.
I felt for the circumstances, they did a pretty good job. I had the same problem. One of them I really wanted to watch was with Susan. Didn't even come on until like the last 10 minutes, and she was frustrated. But it's being offered. I went and watched it again, but I thought it just seemed like we didn't get as much as we should have. It seemed a little shortcut. And the fancy meals, we missed out on them. They still owe us that. So, but for what it was worth, I got a lot out of it.
Any other comments on the conference? I think we can probably share more of those in our. Okay, moving on, 12.7 personnel report. We had any comments or questions during our executive session? Does anybody have any comments or questions about the personnel report that was presented in our packet? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion and a second to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 12.8 substitutes, a plan to attract and retain high-quality substitutes.
You got a chance to take a look at this in your board memo, of course, just a little bit later. Well, this wasn't added to your packet until yesterday. So the gist is we were wanting to do something to try to do our due diligence in retaining substitutes in our district. There are a lot of different ways to look at this, and a lot of angles to attack it from. This is just one. And what we'd like to do is provide a bonus for the pay period is 2 weeks. So 10 days, potentially 10 days of school. And so in a pay period, when a substitute works 6 days or more, they would get a $50 bonus. So there is a potential there for in a month to get a $100 bonus. If they work, if it's a total month, then it would be 12 days. We wanted to start there to see if there was any impact, and then we can survey substitutes and see what their thoughts are. We are looking at other potential efforts to help us here too. So this would be step one as we approach this situation. What questions can we answer for you?
So I actually had a couple people that I know approach this topic with me, and they brought up a couple good points, and I just wanted to ask because I was unaware of them, but they brought up, permanent subs in neighboring districts. Their incentive program is a benefits package. They get allotted to have actual benefits and things such as that nature, which is I thought an interesting idea. I didn't know if that was something that you were familiar to, or if that's.
Yep, Liberty's doing that. I think they have 18 substitutes that are permanent, and you're going to work every day, and here's your rate of pay, and because you're working that much because of the Affordable Care Act, then they purchase their insurance. So that in our district would be about $7,000 per permanent substitute. So we've tried to look towards incentives that wouldn't be that expensive. This total package, if we apply it to last year's data, would be about $10,000. And as I've shared with you, Mr. Kruger has bolstered the substitute budget for each of the schools. So we could do this program within our current budget. But if you lay this over onto a COVID year, it's likely going to be more than the $10,000.
Right.
So again, we would like to add this piece as step one, get some data on it, some feedback from our substitutes, and then go from there as to what we might need to do to continue to improve.
Because are we still, I know I've seen your email go out in terms of utilization of substitutes. Is it still tough finding substitutes across the board to meet our needs?
It is, but our fill rate is much better than our neighbors. For example, North Kansas City is sitting at like 74%. Platte County is 79%. We are we're in the 80s, aren't we?
We're in the high 80s or low 90s.
We're in the high 80s or low 90s, so we're doing much better than our neighbors. And I didn't tell them that today when I met with them, but if there's one classroom that we're scrambling to try to get filled, and principals if it's one, it's too many. We want 100%, so we're going to keep trying to improve, but we're doing better than our neighbors.
The last question that I had is, our permanent subs, are they dedicated to buildings? Because the point she brought up to me was that we had, of course, a vice principal that moves between buildings, and that we have, subs that leave our district and come back into our district. And then she made the point that we have students that visit the elementary schools, so she wasn't sure why the limitation was per building. I said, well, I don't know. That's a good question.
Our permanent subs are tied to a building because they're permanent subs, so that's the building that they're assigned to. But the rest of our subs can go, from building to building.
So like if we have where this building doesn't have a need that day, but the neighboring elementary school does, we can never pool our permanent building subs for that day?
No, we can. And so what we've communicated with our permanent subs is we've tried to be very respectful of what their requests are. So some of them have said, I only want to substitute at the elementary level, or I only want to be in this specific building. So if we had a need, let's say at the high school, and the only sub that was unassigned was at Maple Elementary School, we would not force them to go over to the high school because we did communicate with them that they would be placed at Maple Elementary. If they are open to subbing at any school, we do reach out to all of the building principals and say, At the high school today, we have 2 unfilled positions. Can anybody share one of their permanent subs? Can we shift anybody around? Can we use instructional assistants? What can we do to get these classes covered? And so we actually are doing a lot of shifting and maneuvering every single day. Some of our subs are open to all schools. Some of our subs are assigned to specific schools. Some of our subs only want elementary level, some only want secondary level. So we've really gone through and communicated with every single sub multiple times to get the most out of them and really be able to save our buildings time, be respectful of those substitutes so that we're only reaching out to those who want to be in specific areas. But we have in certain instances reached out to people who have said, I don't even want to sub this semester because of the COVID situation. And when we've been that desperate, we went ahead and reached out and just said, you know, you told us this a couple weeks ago. How are you feeling today? So we've tried to do everything, but no, the cohorting we have done, and we tried to do it a little more restrictive at the beginning, but now looking at how we need to play with our numbers and our staff and what the needs are based on the quarantines in each building, we're really opened that up and we're trying to work together.
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
How do you plan to administer this or keep count it? Because I can see this coming up to a point where, hey, I got my four in these last 2 weeks, and I'm getting our 5th. You're calling somebody else, and you're not calling me. Why didn't I get the call? I've lost out on my $50. All sorts of scenarios and like that. So how do we keep that call-in rate fair and consistent so that we don't have these problems or discrepancies?
Well, our permanent subs are going to get the first opportunity at this, and that's sort of part of the reward for them dedicating their time to Smithville School District and to those specific buildings. And so some of the feedback we got from some of our permanent subs is that they're getting the same rate and yet they're dedicating themselves to Smithville School District. So that's going to be the first call out. It's going to go to those permanent subs. After that, it's going to open up to whatever those substitutes have indicated in their profiles. So if they're picking up subs and or if they build relationships with teachers within specific buildings, those teachers will request people. So in essence, it's not necessarily just going to be absolutely fair across the board. We want to recruit people who want to be here, and the more they sub and build those relationships, they will be rewarded for that with this incentive.
Any other comments or questions on the substitute plan? Thank you, Kim. If no more discussion, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the plan to attract and retain high-quality substitutes as presented by the administration.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the plan to attract and retain high-quality substitutes as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Okay.
Too many tabs open.
Motion passes. 13, additional information, 13.1 miscellaneous.
Yeah, so you've got the NEA meeting on there that you're aware of. You've got the city meeting on there that you're aware of. That's Monday, the 2nd, 6 p.m. at City Hall. It's at City Hall. That's not here. So November 2nd, 6 p.m. at City Hall. Finally, board pictures. We keep struggling to find a date when everybody's going to be here that will work. Today would have been a great one, but we also had to get in your new teachers because it was already October. So Lynn is not going to be here in November. So what about December? Does everybody anticipate that they will be here for December board meeting? As far as you know?
Yeah.
You're laughing. Are you not going to be here?
Depends if I get elected or not.
Okay.
I'll be out of town.
Well, we can superimpose you. We're at a point where
We
We're
can,
gonna go
we
full
can,
sketch.
we can Greg Chastain you.
we've done that before. We will, and it's amazing what Jim Reed can do. So
We're just sketchy, man.
not at, for one thing, it's not at our place. I get to get the pictures done. We could do it here and then go down there. That's not a bad thought. November 2nd, is everyone planning on going to the city meeting?
Yes.
Yes? You are now? Everybody else?
Right, what do you, yeah, can you squeeze us in for a few minutes on the second? Okay.
Well, that's
I know it's a stressful night for you.
yeah. Are you going to be out knocking on doors on the second? Better be done by then, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So November 2nd, it sounds like. Donna, you want to get with Jim? Probably better do it at, what do you think, guys? 5:15?
5:15,
Yeah.
5:15.
5:15? Okay, 5:15, then we'll go into, that'll be it. Let's do that up here in the pack.
Yeah. do it here.
He likes to do those in the pack in the lobby here. And wear your tuxedo. And then we'll go down to the city meeting in our tuxedos. Okay? Black or white, doesn't matter.
I'm not wearing a tuxedo.
All right, so that's settled. A great idea. I think, I don't know if it was Wade or who suggested the second, Sarah. Very good. And then I want to give this to you. And I apologize for handing you paper. I normally don't do that. Kind of a last minute decision on my part. So Ingram's, as you're probably aware, they come out every year with a school district ranking, and they break it up by Missouri and Kansas. This data is strictly ACT data. Yeah. Okay? It's strictly ACT data. But you can tell they've broken it down over several years. And they also have included there in the column next to the superintendent's name, the percent, the total number of students, and then the percent that took the test. That percent that took the test is an important number. We used to do things this way, and then for a couple of years, the state gave us money to test all of our students. And then they took the money away. And so for a while, you can see there the bottom two numbers for every district are typically lower than the very top number. Well, the bottom two numbers, we were testing everybody, or darn near everybody. And then the top number, well, you know, they're not required to take it. They don't want to take it. So, you know, we're not going to make them take it. And so for us, it's 78.2% that year. And then you can see on up into Kearney, 92.9, below us, Park Hill, 98.2. But note that we're tied for third on this group on the Missouri side. So no matter how you slice it, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Our students and staff did a pretty good job of that. And we're usually in that area. You can see we're at number 5 last year. It shows you where you were last year. Look at old Maysville down there, number 7. Superintendent, Mr. Chris Hessling. That's all I have for you.
Cool. That's interesting.
Did you just hurt your shoulder patting yourself on the back?
I said teachers and students, not superintendents.
Does anybody have anything else? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to adjourn our meeting.
Yeah.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Please vote.
Where do they feed these kids in Kansas?
I know.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Guys, thank you. Sorry for the late meeting.
Got a lot done.
Yeah, I told my wife, oh, I'll be done